Chapter 401. The elderly gentleman said with a somber face, "For the sake of our ancestors, I am willing to sacrifice everything. But this is the last time I will help you. And these are the last few drops of Tai Sui blood you will get. I really can't understand why you don't just go kill old Demon Duan." The middle-aged storyteller raised an eyebrow and said, "Indeed, even without the help of Tai Sui, I still have the capability to kill old Demon Duan, but that's not enough for me. They have such powers. I want to devour them, make them into nourishment for our clan and the rejuvenation of Tai Sui." The elderly gentleman looked at him and said, "I hope you won't disappoint me." Then he took off his robe and walked naked behind the screen. Visible to the naked eye, his body, especially his buttocks, was covered in dark bruises, looking both like birthmarks and some kind of bite marks. Almost at the same time, the red strings behind the screen began to tremble with excitement. The middle-aged storyteller respectfully saluted and left with the Tai Sui blood. The martial world. It's time for a bloodthirsty storyteller's blood tide to be passed down from person to person. First to be swept up by it would be none other than the great hero storyteller led by old Demon Duan. Unfortunately, Tai Sui is left with only a remnant body, still needing time and nutrients to nourish. Otherwise, not just old Demon Duan and the great hero storyteller, but the whole martial world would have long been under their control. The middle-aged storyteller knew that the most prosperous era of their ancestral Tai Sui was also their group's most glorious time. Beneath the Tai Sui blood, the bloodthirsty storyteller's blood tide would sweep across the world, described by some as plague-like, virtually unstoppable. According to the Sex Archive at that time, Sui masters like him could with a single sentence infect thousands upon thousands of people, commanding them, similar to the legendary word following. It was all just a matter of time. Restoring the glory of the Tai Sui sect is our unshirkable duty. Looking at the black blood in the porcelain bowl, the storyteller's eyes were filled with passionate and wild fervor. Spring, unconsciously, spring really arrived. Though the weather was still somewhat chilly with the spring cold, the wild cats on the graveyard had begun their mating calls, and the Murong brothers were pretentiously grooming their hair, dressed in what they believed to be the most handsome swordsman's thin shirt. Yuju Villa, a picture of tranquil times. Of course, there were also moments of intense passion. Like now, as the Murong brothers and Duan Yun stood atop the graveyard hill, blades drawn and facing each other. Murong brothers, holding the green moon saber, said, "You shouldn't have come." "But I still came." Duan Yun, holding the one row, replied, "Don't think you can beat me like last time. You fickle-hearted person, you don't understand a night listening to spring rain at all." Murong brothers said with a face full of pure love, "Oh, is that so? I believe that more is better, and better is more." As soon as the words were spoken, Dharma image Xiao Yu and Qing had already materialized behind him, much like his wings. Murong brothers maintained a pure love expression, earnestly stating, "First off, this time, you're not allowed to hit my face or make me pee." He knew all too well the embarrassment of having a loved one beaten by old Demon Duan until they wet themselves. Duan Yun said with a look of disgust, "Are we fighting or not? If not, let's go eat." Feng Linger and others who came to watch also complained, "Come on, can you hurry up?" Saying this, she turned to Shining, Ziyu, and Ning Qing and said, "Are you betting? I think he'll last at most the time it takes for an incense to burn." Ning Qing, looking at the two on the hilltop, focused on the Murong brothers and said, "But he has really been working hard recently, and has become much stronger." Feng Linger shook her head. "Sometimes, hard work is useless. I bet it's still within the time of an incense stick." Ning Qing bit her lip and said, "I bet it will be longer than that." Shining pondered, "No hitting the face, no peeing, Duan Yun using blades instead of swords, a lot of restrictions. I also bet it will be longer than the time of an incense." Ziyu analyzed, "Murong brothers have been striving hard these days, while Duan Yun has been getting plenty of sleep. I also bet it will be longer than the time of an incense." "All right, no more bets. The stake is cleaning the latrine 10 times. Saying this, she took out the betting instrument, an incense stick, and planted it in a grave nearby. Just as her voice fell, the two on the graveyard hill moved. A bright sword light shone forth, just like the delicate spring breeze and rain outside the pavilion. Meeting it was Duan Yun's fist, a ferocious fist. Boom! Like spring thunder striking the earth, the mound of the graveyard exploded, and black bamboo flew chaotically. One could see the Murong brothers with eyes full of purity and surging love, wielding their blades like multiple round moons attacking. Duan Yun, on the other hand, his left hand executing strange boxing techniques and Dharma image Qing smoothly connected like hair, while his right hand swung one row, cutting out 6 layers of spring rain which intertwined with Xiao Yu's 1 layer of spring rain, forming 7 layers of spring rain. In the past, Duan Yun would have to roar to cut 7 layers of spring rain. Now it was almost effortlessly within his grasp. Duan Yun went all out, his left fist power fierce and mighty, his right sword qi refined and swift. Combined together, they were like endless waves, overwhelming and relentless. Murong brothers, although facing only one person, felt as if they were being attacked by 2 having an illicit affair. These days, Duan Yun's synergy with his wings grew more tacit, resembling the time he and Feng Linger and Shun Ying cooked together, much like the feeling of a family of 3. Ziyu, witnessing this scene, couldn't help but mutter, "How many can this old demon be with? Why does it seem like he would not spare even the Dharma images?" At this point, everyone became tense, because the time allocated by the incense stick was about to run out. It had to be said, the Murong brothers' recent efforts had not been in vain. Their enduring grudge born by the green saber and the pure emotions from a night listening to spring rain could seamlessly switch. No, they could even inspire each other. The pure love from a night listening to spring rain could stimulate the resentment and pain of the green saber. Much like a scribbled book, the purer the beginning, the greener the latter parts become, the more unsettling for the reader. Chapter 402. Fist power and sword qi collided, causing the surrounding black bamboo to shatter and scatter, and the ignored graves to explode. Just as the last bit of the incense was burning out, someone shouted, "Oh!" Originally provoked by Green Saber, the pure love swordsmen, Murong brothers, were struck by a fist power, their head plowing through more than 10 grave mounds, and then they fell down. They lay there, continuously spitting out dirt.
Feng Linger excitedly excelime, ion.
Duan is really amazing. Duan is really strong. Shining and Ziyu couldn't help but rebuke the Murong brothers. "Can't you put up a bit more of a fight? Just hold on a bit longer." As she spoke, Shining shattered a nearby dirt grave with a punch, just like a desperate gambler losing their temper. Ning Qing helped the Murong brothers up, comforting them with, "You did very well." The originally fallen pure love swordsman suddenly seemed filled with power again, ardently saying to Duan Yun, "Next time, this young hero will beat you." Days passed uneventfully, and when peach blossoms in the courtyard began to bloom abundantly, everyone knew that spring had truly arrived. Ning Qing had also gotten used to life at Yuzhu Villa. Even though she occasionally stole glances at Duan Yun's handsome face, she was used to being by Murong brothers' side. Looking at handsome men wasn't crossing the line, but a natural appreciation. This was something normal women do. If it was a mistake, then it was a mistake all women would make. Because she wasn't involved in old demon Duan's struggles, Ning Qing was extremely popular, forming an alliance with Feng Linger in the morning, deepening sisterly affection with Shen Ying in the afternoon, and discussing plots with Ziyu at night. That day, she and Ziyu had plans to go together to Small Spring City to buy clothes. In the evening, the Murong brothers were sitting outside the gate, waiting for Ning Qing to return like the wife-waiting stone. Feng Linger frowned and said, "It's only been an hour since she left, yet you're acting as if it's been ages." Shining joked, "What do you mean ages? It's more like he's lost his soul." Indeed, the consensus at Yuzhu Villa was that Murong brothers were truly infatuated, the type who'd threaten to hang themselves without their beloved woman. No way around it, he knew too much about pure love and Green Saber. After all, having gone through a few incidents of falling for his own sisters, he was here waiting for death. And now, having experienced hardships and meeting Ning Qing, who was very likely not his sister, why wouldn't he be distressed? By the time it started to get dark, Murong brothers were becoming restless. Why is it taking so long? Feng Linger explained, women take some time when they go out shopping for clothes and jewelry. Look at us when we go fishing. It can last all day and night. Murong nodded, but he still couldn't settle down, saying, Ning Qing usually returns before dark. What if something has happened? No, I need to go look for her. Saying this, he headed out the door. Duan Yun and the others knew they couldn't stop this lovesick man, so they let him go. It was now completely dark, dinner was ready, but neither Ning Qing nor Ziyu, nor even Murong who went out to find them, had returned. An invisible pressure spread, and Duan Yun and the others began to grow restless. Shun Ying suggested, could it be Mingyu Palace? Duan Yun stood up, his gaze cold as he said, I'll go check it out. I'm coming too. Me too. Thus, those who were initially left behind to cook at Yuzhu Villa also left, heading towards small Springtown in a total turnout. Tonight, with no stars or moon in the sky, traveling on the road made Duan Yun somewhat anxious. Just like the time he returned to this villa's cellar, and Murong didn't come out for a long while. Back then, it was a false alarm, but what about this time? Hopefully, no one would really dare to disrespect him. Chapter 403. What pettiness! This is called taking precautions. Night falls, with few people left on the streets of small Springtown. Especially after several beggars froze to death in winter, the number of people active on the streets at night dwindled even more. Only a braised food stall and a tavern kept their lights burning. Previously, there was a storyteller who would tell tales at night, providing a semblance of liveliness. But since the storyteller started getting argued with and even beaten, the nights fell silent of stories. Thus, in this desolate night, Duan Yun and his two companions were searching for someone. On the road, a beggar was shivering with his neck shrunk in. Suddenly, a piece of silver dropped in front of him, lighting up his eyes. Have you seen two rather beautiful women? Duan Yun asked. Seeing how young Duan Yun was, the beggar couldn't help but say, Big brother, are you looking to visit a brothel? There's more than just two beautiful women. Duan Yun, call your leader over here. There had to be a leader among these beggars. While the beggar gang's influence in Yun State wasn't strong, there were still leaders ruling their territories. Our leader won't meet anyone so easily. Thud. Duan Yun threw another piece of broken silver down. The beggar's eyes revealed a greedy look as he said, Big brother, it's not that I don't want to help. He was just angling for more money. But the next moment, a hand was already pressing down on his head, bringing with it a strange suction force. The beggar's greedy eyes suddenly went blank as he cried out, I want to become a hero. Take me to see your leader, Duan Yun said. All right, a hero should lead the way. The beggar stood up and started leading the way. Duan Yun casually reclaimed all the silver he had just given out. He had intended to solve the problem with silver, but now he felt he shouldn't give it anymore. The beggar leader's den was located in the city god temple outside the town, whose deity statues had long been removed, leaving the beggar leader lying on top. It must be said, this beggar leader was living quite comfortably. When Duan Yun and his companions walked in, he was sleeping in a big floral quilt, with chicken legs, rice meat, and fruit trays laid out beside him for a late-night snack. Well, he was eating better than Duan Yun and his companions. Similarly, this beggar leader was a greedy and prideful creature who wanted more money. Infuriated by Duan Yun disturbing his eating and drinking, he was quite dissatisfied. He was very much like a corrupt troublemaker. The next instant, the city god temple echoed with the calls of, I want to become a hero. That night, the beggars of small Springtown seemed to have gone mad, yelling, I want to become a hero, while helping to search for people. Indeed, under the influence of young hero Duan, they all became very righteous, helping without asking for a single penny. Unfortunately, even with local snakes' help, Duan Yun and company still didn't get many clues. They had only seen Ning Qing and Ziyu in the afternoon. Their beauty and foreignness attracted the beggars' attention. This group of beggars liked to steal things, but they didn't dare to mess with them. For in the martial world, women who could stroll the streets so boldly without attendants were definitely more terrifying than 10 burly men. The beggars also knew how to size people up and could tell the two women were likely skilled in martial arts. The trail ended there, because even though some had seen them, no one knew where they had gone. However, one beggar mentioned, "Today, it seems there were more beautiful strangers in Small Spring Town than just those two." According to this little beggar, there was a stunningly beautiful woman in red who appeared in Small Spring Town, even more breathtaking compared to Ning Qing and Ziyu. But her whereabouts were elusive. Talk appeared and disappeared, with only this little beggar claiming to have seen her, making his peers doubt his sight. In Small Spring Town, if any strange beautiful women appeared, they would be noticed right away. After all, chatting about women was one of the few entertainment activities these beggars enjoyed every day. Hearing this news, a sense of unease grew in the hearts of Duan Yun and his companions. A mysterious beautiful woman vanishing along with Ziyu and Ning Qing. This was all too similar to the style of Mingyu Palace. So, they had no choice but to meet up with the Murong brothers first. When Duan Yun and his companions found the Murongs, he was still frantically searching, like a man possessed. When Duan Yun informed him that even the beggars had little to offer in terms of clues, the Murong brothers knelt on the ground with a thud. "Ning Qing, how am I to live without you? And Ning Tian, my sister, is the most." A smack, and the Murong brothers' impassioned grief was interrupted by Wuqing. A slap from Duan Yun had silenced him. "Calm down, woman. It's still unclear if anything untoward has happened," Duan Yun reminded. Feng Linger quickly chimed in. "That's right, women love shopping. Maybe they just didn't fancy the clothes here. Perhaps they've gone to Wangchun City." Shining analyzed. "Yes, for all we know. They might be gambling addicts, possibly gambling away in a Wangchun City gambling house right now. Or maybe they're brothel frequenters who enjoy that sort of thing, and they could be in a blue building." Hearing this, the Murong brother with a handprint on his face turned green, saying, "What?" Feng Linger promptly pushed Shining aside and said, "Shut up if you can't speak properly. Look, maybe they have finished shopping and are waiting for us to return. Who knows? Right, let's go back and check." Duan Yun agreed. "Then let's hurry back. Ning Qing will be worried without seeing me." With those words, the Murong brother ran towards Yuzhu Villa like a lost soul. Each member of the group was a high-level martial artist. Their running was almost as if they were flying. The Murong brother reached the villa first. Then he suddenly stood still, not moving an inch. Chapter 404. Under the cover of night, he stood motionless at the entrance of the mountain villa, as if possessed by a ghost, looking somewhat terrifying. Duan Yun rushed over and also froze in place. In front of the mountain villa's gate hung a person. Yes, this person was bound with red rope in a complicated manner and hung in front of the door, a piece of red candle placed beneath them. In the dim light, the scene looked somewhat terrifying and yet somewhat alluring. The reason is that this binding method is somewhat similar to the method used in games between men and women. Who had strung up a person here? Duan Yun walked over. At that moment, he raised his eyebrows slightly, because it was not until now that he realized this person was not real. More like a paper effigy, by the candlelight, he could see the supporting bamboo strips inside. However, the skin of this paper figure seemed like real human skin, which was why he couldn't tell at first. The key point was this face actually bore some resemblance to his own. Damn it, are they provoking me on purpose? At this moment, the sharp-eyed Shin Ing couldn't help but say, "There is a note there." With a whoosh, Duan Yun cut the red rope, and the fake person fell to the ground. The note was stuck to the back of the fake person's neck, previously unclear due to the dim environment. Duan Yun reached for it, and suddenly a series of flying needles shot out, aimed directly at his face. "Be careful." At the moment Shining warned him, Duan Yun's forehead had already released breaking body sword energy, deflecting the flying needles. When the flying needles hit the ground, the spring grass quickly withered. Such poisonous needles. Such a sinister tactic. Duan Yun picked up the note in his hand and read it carefully, seeing 2 lines written on it. Hearing you possess a pair of beauties, I longed for a glimpse, and they indeed suit my heart's desire. My yearning for them mirrors my yearning for you, ever constant in my thoughts, hoping you will not forget my adoration. Yours truly, with another bow. Yearn for your mother's eggs. I'll be right over to send you on your way, Duan Yun said ominously. Now it was certain, Ziyu and Ningqing had been taken by people from Mingyu Palace. The other party had purposely left a look-alike fake person and the note. This was not simply a matter of disrespect. It was a mocking challenge. Duan Yun was still immersed in fury when he suddenly felt the voice of snowflakes fluttering. It was already spring, where could the snow be coming from? At that moment, Murong saw the note in Duan Yun's hand, suddenly knelt on the ground, and cried out, "No!
Ningqing.
How can I go on living without you? Do you know? I love you for 10,000 years. My love for you will never change." For a time, everyone listening to Murong's mad-like singing had an illusion of snowflakes hitting the ground. With a slap, Murong's impassioned and sorrowful singing came to an abrupt halt. Duan Yun gave him another slap, causing the tears welling up in Murong's eyes to fan out. When I used to practice martial arts, I wasn't trying to prove how great I was, just didn't want to be kicked around like a ball. Not even afforded a shred of respect. Mingyu Palace, you really want to play it like this, huh? Duan Yun said, grabbing Murong's collar with a serious look. Calm down. Man up and come with me to rescue them. Then slaughter these mad women until their blood runs like rivers. Murong looked at him, tears still in his eyes, and said, But what should we do? Mingyu Palace is a martial arts myth, a holy land of martial arts, and a forbidden place, not just mysterious but full of danger. For a time, Murong had no idea what to do. Feng Linger and Shining fell into thought. There are no men in Mingyu Palace, not even the gatekeepers, all women. Every 2 years on the 2nd day of the 2nd lunar month, when the dragon raises its head, Mingyu Palace selects female slaves in Tianliang town. Some of these female slaves remain so forever, but some are taken for testing. If they catch the eye during the testing, they could be taken in as disciples of Mingyu Palace. Duan Yun said earnestly. At that moment, Murong, Shining, and Feng Linger all showed surprised expressions. Murong asked nervously, How do you know this so well? After all, Duan Yun was a rookie in the martial world with very little knowledge of its secrets, which was one of the few areas where he was stronger than Duan Yun. Duan Yun explained, Of course, I bought this information with silver. After all, Mingyu Palace once pursued you and disrespected me. Although at the time I heeded your suggestion and temporarily let it go. I couldn't sleep well, so I went and bought some information. I never thought we'd actually use it. At this moment, the Murong brothers completely understood. Anyone who had ever offended Duan Yun would find it difficult to be removed from his little blacklist. Even if temporarily forgotten, it was just a matter of time. Should they do something to annoy him again, their names would be reactivated on his list. The nicer way of putting it was being precautious and ready to strike down evil demons at all times. The less nice way was that it showed pettiness. Those who had offended him were likely going to be on his mind forever. The thought of being on Duan Yun's mind forever was terrifying. Yet, the dummy on the ground, the sinister poison needles, and the provocative note all proved that Mingyu Palace was not at all afraid of this terror. That was what made Mingyu Palace terrifying. It always struck a heavy blow when you least expected it. What should we do? Asked the Murong brothers, still confused. Even with this knowledge, they had no clue what to do next. Duan Yun's mind, flickering with extraordinary wisdom, said, We set off now. We can still make it in time for the selection in Tianliang town. Remember how we saved the Chongling sect? The Murong brothers, dumbfounded, said, But we were gatekeepers then, and you said Mingyu Palace only admits women. Even the gatekeepers are women. Suddenly, it dawned on him, exclaiming, I get it. Your old demon Duan. Hurry and turn me into a woman. We can both turn into women and blend in. Duan Yun looked disgusted. I told you, my legitimate cultivation techniques can't turn a man into a woman, but we must blend in. How do we blend in? The Morong brothers asked, puzzled. Duan Yun looked toward Fenglinger and said, Of course, disguise ourselves as women to blend in. Fenglinger appeared troubled and said, Disguise skills can make you look like women, especially since you're good-looking. It will be easier. But if Mingyu Palace does some checking, you might give yourselves away. She then looked toward the chest area of Duan Yun and Morong brothers. Shining said, I know a way to temporarily enlarge a man's chest, so even if they check it won't give them away. Fenglinger, looking at Xinying's flat chest, doubted, Are you sure? Xining then whispered a few words to Duan Yun. Duan Yun looked skeptical but nodded and pressed 7 acupoints on his body and began rhythmic breathing exercises. In the blink of an eye, his chest miraculously bulged out. Everyone was stunned. Xining said, This can last for 6 hours a day. Just repeat it daily. But what if they check down there? Fenglinger glanced at Duan Yun's crotch. Having taken a sneaky look before, they know that thing wasn't easy to hide. Duan Yun said, We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I'll see if I can come up with a technique to hide it on the way. That can be invented? Everyone was shocked. But then they remembered this was Duan Yun. It seemed possible. Mingyu Palace might not check so rigorously. Let's blend in and see, explained Duan Yun. At that moment, Xining skeptically asked, Since it's only women allowed, why don't we women just directly infiltrate? Right. Fenglinger also looked at Duan Yun. Duan Yun relented. You're no match for the mad woman. The Morong brothers can last nearly a stick of incense under my control. You would only last for half. I don't believe it. Neither do I. But their confidence slowly deflated, and their previously perked chests settled. Duan Yun looked at them with a touch of tenderness and said, Ziyu and Ning Qing are in trouble. You can't risk your safety as well. After we rescue Ziyu and Ning Qing, you'll still need to be our backup on the outside. Xining pondered. Let's not talk about whether we should go or not. Let's first see what trouble you may encounter. Fenglinger said, You guys, posing as women, should hide that thing well. Soon, you may have to share rooms and beds with other female slaves, use the same outhouse and bathe in the same place. Meanwhile, the initially morose Morong brothers perked up upon hearing this, exclaiming, With so many problems to solve, why aren't you hurrying to make us human skin masks? Time waits for no one. Duan Yun nodded wholeheartedly in agreement. Suddenly, both were eager to proceed. Mingyu Palace, the Yuzhu twins are coming. Chapter 405. Fight fire with fire? Listening to how he could eat, sleep, and even bathe and visit the latrine with the women, Morong, whose eyes had been dull earlier, suddenly surged with motivation. To save Ning Qing and Ziyu, and to carry out acts of chivalry, such sacrifices were worthwhile. Xining continued to analyze the problems Duan Yun might encounter and said, You mentioned that after leaving the Gathering Talent Manor, your electricity wasn't enough. The forbidden grounds of Mingyu Palace in the martial arts world. Surely a place fraught with dangers, not a straightforward spot like the Gathering Talent Manor. Duan Yun confidently responded, Even without the electromagnetic sword field, I can still take down the mad woman. Moreover, our first priority is to rescue them. Seeing the confident Duan Yun, the group had grown accustomed to it. Or rather, become numb to it. Now they were just waiting for Fenglinger to make the human skin masks. Still the familiar sesame oil and still kneading the human skin like dough. But this time, Fenglinger needed to be more careful and precise. Especially since Duan Yun and Morong were disguising as women this time, not just molding based on a man's facial structure as before. Especially for Morong, not only did he need to look like a woman, but a pretty one at that, which was quite a challenge. No way around it, as it said that Mingyu Palace doesn't accept ugly women. She had to put extra effort into this. Only by dawn did Fenglinger manage to complete the 2 human skin masks. These masks indeed took much of her energy, leaving her looking a bit tired. But the results were quite good. When Duan Yun and Murong stepped out wearing skirts, Feng Linger and Shining stared at Duan Yun for a long while. It has to be said, a good base makes even cross-dressing look good, and the current Duan Yun, also known by others as the fearsome old demon Duan, now looked like a stunning and tall young lady. While Murong, although barely passable as pretty, had a somewhat rustic air. Yet he was quite pleased with himself, wiggling his hips and asking, "Do I look beautiful?" If not for fearing that his human skin mask would fly off, Duan Yun would have slapped him again. This guy is becoming more unhinged and flirtatious, fashioning himself as some allure-filled tart when disguised as a woman. But by this time, they had completed all their preparation tasks. So they set off. Since the last big fight at the Gathering Talent Manor, the people of Yuju Villa had enjoyed some peaceful times. But this incident made Duan Yun profoundly aware of the madness and dangers of the world. After the bloody battle at Gathering Talent Manor and killing the mad woman of Yellow Tower, the confidence of both he and Murong had significantly boosted, especially after the storyteller tried to bring disaster upon them, but ended up being publicly contradicted by the sex. Their confidence was even stronger. This gave an illusion that they, the heroes of Yuju, had some sway in martial world. Everyone had to respect them. He and Murong thought Mingyu Palace would show them some respect, but unfortunately, it turned out otherwise. This absurd and sordid world, filled with too many blind, evil forces. It could only be said that the revolution is not yet a success. The young heroes must strive harder. Though Duan Yun was annoyed, he remained calm at heart. His extraordinary wisdom told him the primary mission this time was to rescue others. They had to properly go undercover. I understand, if Ning Qing performs a sacrifice to heaven, Murong might well break down. Murong is his friend, a confidant, and a life-risking companion, also sharing a heart full of righteousness. Being a young hero means honoring loyalty. His sense of loyalty told him, Murong must not go mad or break down. So, the real action could only start after finding Ning Qing and Ziyu. In the carriage, Murong looked at Duan, a bit uneasily asking, "Duan? We'll arrive in 2 days. Didn't you say you'd use your extraordinary wisdom to deduce Song's cultivation technique?" While saying that, he glanced at the pants under his powdered skirt. Duan Yun sat there, saying, "Don't feel like deducing anymore. Let's leave it at this. Neither my wisdom nor I want to deal with that." Yes, cross-dressing was his limit. He's not a freak like Murong, who once wanted to become a woman. They just need to be careful with their skills. They likely won't be discovered. I should be more cautious. Saying that, Murong raised his pinky in a mockingly feminine gesture. Tea fields, the fresh green of early spring tea fields with the mountain mists, resembled an ancient and vibrant scroll painting, imparting a sense of thriving life. Following the tea fields up the mountain, one could vaguely see the white walls and black tiles. There lay Tianliang town, the second day of the second month, the day of the dragon raising its head. Today wasn't the day for picking spring tea, but Tianliang town's largest Qingfeng tea garden was bustling with people. Tianliang town's spring tea was famous, a tribute to the royal palace. However, the finest tea leaves were not tribute, as they were reserved for Mingyu Palace. Here, the status of Mingyu Palace was higher than the emperor's, much higher. Since Qingfeng Tea Garden was a property of Mingyu Palace, naturally those who came here were hopefuls to be selected by Mingyu Palace. Duan Yun and Murong were among them. Mingyu Palace was mysterious and strict, but this was just the selection process for servants. As long as the money was right, one could blend in. At a glance, hundreds of women stood in a line, dressed in colorful attire, looking like a lineup for the emperor's selection of concubines. Duan Yun never thought he'd end up being one of those selected for the harem, but at this moment, he had to stand there obediently. Chapter 406. No way around it, finding someone was paramount. The selector was a woman in red, who looked somewhat harsh. Before her, one by one, the girls walked past and were questioned. In Duan Yun's eyes, this woman had a bit of an HR vibe to her, and the kind that was prone to giving a hard time to workers. "How old are you this year?" the woman in red asked. 18, a woman replied. 18? You look like 28 would be a conservative guess. Take off your shoes, the woman in red said sternly. The woman hurried to remove her embroidered shoes. The woman in red was dissatisfied and said, "Big toe turning outwards, no good." The woman had no choice but to leave, aggrieved. The women in front were either happy or sad. Some were selected, and others were eliminated. Even Duan Yun couldn't figure out the actual criteria and felt a bit anxious. After all, he wasn't really a woman. But Morong felt very confident, because he thought himself extremely beautiful, the epitome of a woman. If not to choose him, then who? Now it was Duan Yun's turn. The moment Duan Yun walked over, the woman in red's eyes lit up. However, she quickly reverted to her harsh demeanor and asked, "Name?" "Duan Linger," Duan Yun said, dressed in a small floral skirt and looking sweet. Then the woman observed him for a while and discussed something with an old lady beside her. The old lady said, "Sister, since you value her so much, shall I thoroughly inspect her?" The woman in red shook her head and said, "No need. She looks like the type who's clean and orderly in her menstrual cycle." Duan Yun listened to this conversation and just felt a headache coming on. He never thought that one day he would be described as having a regular menstrual cycle. "All right, go wait at Greenleaf Inn." Duan Yun blinked, knowing he had just barely made it through. Next up was Murong. Seeing Duan Yun pass smoothly, Murong, who believed himself to be prettier and more feminine, became even more confident and involuntarily puffed out his ample chest. "Name?" the woman in red asked. "Duan Murong," Murong replied. He was previously quite pleased with himself for having chosen such a name. Duanmu suggested dignity, and Rong echoed Murong, sounding pleasant and meaningful. The woman in red and the old lady looked him up and down. Initially, they seemed quite satisfied. After all, Feng Linger's skills in disguise were exceptional, and Murong indeed looked somewhat better than the others. But then the woman in red voiced her concern. "Why do I detect a whiff of the brothel about you? Have you worked as a prostitute?" Murong was quick to deny. "Not at all. Absolutely not. Mingyu Palace does not appreciate that sort of air about a person." The woman in red mused. It was clear she was also hesitant. Just then, the old lady suggested, "Qing, I think her figure is better suited to being a wet nurse." "A wet nurse?" Murong was shocked and protested. "I'm a pure maiden. How can I be a wet nurse?" The woman in red stated frankly, "Within the palace, if you are needed, you are. If not, there's no need to be. Are you willing?" Murong thought he needed to infiltrate at all costs, so he said, "I'm willing." "All right, wait over there." Murong had managed to get in with a scare, but was somewhat perplexed about the future path of his undercover mission. He couldn't possibly really nurse children. His fake breasts could only last for at most 6 hours. Seeing Murong approach in a clearly worried state, Duan Yun asked what was wrong. Once Murong shared his concerns with him, Duan Yun tried to maintain his composure but eventually couldn't help but let out a stifled giggle. "Wet nurse? Cuckoo. As there were other selected women present in Greenleaf Inn, Duan Yun smiled with restraint. If he couldn't control himself, he probably wouldn't be able to maintain his female voice. Out of the over 100 women who wanted to serve at Mingyu Palace, about 70 remained. Nearly half were eliminated. At this moment, the red-dressed examiner walked in, and the surroundings quickly fell silent. The red-dressed woman, looking somewhat severe, sighed as she looked at Duan Yun and the others. "This might be the worst year I've selected people. If it were by the usual standards, some of you would never make it to Mingyu Palace." After that, the old crone began to inquire each person about what they were best at and most wanted to do. When the old crone asked what the Murong brothers wanted to do, they promptly said, "Gatekeeper." The elder looked at him with a meaningful gaze, saying, "There are several kinds of gatekeepers. There are those who guard the main gate, those who handle mechanisms, those who watch over medicinal materials. Which are you interested in?" The Murong brothers replied, "Is there the kind who substitutes for the palace master and elders in guarding the doors? I am always meticulous in my duties." I'm sure I can satisfy the palace master and the elders. Whoever could take Ning Qing and Ziyu away so silently must be at the elder level at least. So in order to find them, it would be best to have the opportunity to interact with the higher-ups of Mingyu Palace. The old woman looked at him and answered, "Of course, there is. But such a duty is something even I would want. Who wouldn't want to be closer to the palace master and the elders?" Hence, she felt that the Murong brothers were rather greedy and decisively wrote the words "wet nurse" next to their names. Seeing these two characters, if it weren't for the crowd around him, and the old crone and the red-dressed woman right beside him, Duan Yun might have laughed out loud. Those two characters were indeed full of comedic effect. After the old woman had asked everyone selected, she didn't lead Duan Yun and the others away. At this point, the red-dressed woman said, "After this, you all will be considered servants of Mingyu Palace, and everything must follow the rules. You've all struggled so much to enter Mingyu Palace. Naturally, it won't treat you badly. For the next 2 days, you will first learn a breathing method from me. For these people to learn a type of martial arts before even starting to work, this was truly a joyous occasion. It was a simple breathing technique, but after all, it was handed down from Mingyu Palace, and the group could not help being excited. After all, there were some girls here who had heard that there was a noble family back home that taught their servants a certain kind of breathing technique. It was said that the servant ate only vegetarian meals but could do the work of several oxen. Hearing that they were going to learn a cultivation technique, the Murong brothers and Duan Yun glanced at each other. This confirmed the costly intelligence that Duan Yun had previously bought was correct. On the second day of the second month, Mingyu Palace was not only recruiting servants but was also looking to see if they could select potentially capable people to test. The Murong brothers couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Whether they could escape from the wet nurse duty or not, they reckoned it could only hinge on this now. It wasn't that he didn't want to be a wet nurse, but that he simply couldn't do it. If old Demon Duan's techniques were effective, he might really be able to get pregnant after transforming, but the key issue was it had no effect. His chest was fake while his brotherhood was real. How could he be a wet nurse? Seeing this, Duan Yun reminded him, "Don't perform too well." The Murong brothers immediately understood what he meant. They needed to blend in this time and had sealed their chi-si to make themselves appear as females who had not studied martial arts. But if they performed too well, too familiar with the technique, they could easily arouse suspicion. Then the red-dressed woman began to teach the breathing method. The technique was very simple, even more so for cultivation geniuses like Duan Yun and Murong. It was basic. It was like asking a doctoral student in mathematics to solve kindergarten arithmetic. However, they pretended it took them a full hour to figure out the rhythm of breathing. At dusk, the red-dressed woman started to check their cultivation progress, having everyone practice the breathing technique while she observed. Actually, Duan Yun and Murong had already discovered that this breathing technique did have some unique effects. Although this was a very basic technique for strengthening chi blood, it induced a subtle change. After practicing, the body's hair would stand on end slightly. So, at this time, Duan Yun and Murong began to practice the breathing technique a bit more earnestly, and soon enough, the hair they had carefully shaved off earlier, which had now grown back a little, appropriately stood up a bit. The red-dressed woman's gaze swept over everyone one by one, and finally, she called out, "Lu Qing, Li Mei, Duan Murong, Zhao Qing, Song Hui, Yu Qian, Huang Tian, Duan Linger, follow me." Duan Yun and Murong brothers, along with this girl, all showed a secretly pleased expression, because they knew they had been selected. For a moment, Duan Yun even felt some anticipation. He wondered what kind of martial arts practice Mingyu Palace would have them trial. The so-called "know thy enemy and know thyself," you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. If he could learn Mingyu Palace's techniques while infiltrating, then he, the nameless young hero, would have the chance to execute a return the validation upon the originator. Thinking about this, Duan Yun became increasingly excited. Chapter 407. Goddammit. This place really deserves to be completely destroyed. Duan Yun and Murong brothers, a party of 8, were selected and swiftly set out, led by a woman in red. After leaving Tianliang town, they boarded a boat at Liangshui Pier. Even though the spring tea hadn't hit the market yet, several boats were already loading and unloading goods at the pier, showing the scale of Tianliang town's tea industry. Meanwhile, the remaining servants boarded another boat. Soon, the boat entered a narrower waterway. The river was fast-flowing, with sheer cliffs or dense forests lining each bank, making it impossible to see their tops from aboard the boat. Occasional mysterious howls of ancient primates added a lot of mystery to the region. Duan Yun couldn't help but think of the little monkey that had come to repay a favor before. It hadn't been seen for a long time, and he wondered about its current situation. At noon, a thick fog arose on the riverway, turning everything around into a white blur. The wooden boat continued to dart through the river at an unchanged pace, and the scenery within the mist appeared abruptly before one's eyes, always giving Duan Yun the illusion that the boat might hit an iceberg the next second and then sink. Duan Yun and the Murong brothers noticed that here, the riverway widened and narrowed unpredictably, with the boat constantly changing direction. The riverway had become bewilderingly complex, and the thick fog made it easy to get lost. This was almost like a natural barrier, perhaps also the reason why Mingyu Palace had always been so mysterious. Firstly, people dare not seek it. Secondly, it's difficult to find. At this time, someone brought over a jade green pill, instructing everyone to take it. It was a young female disciple of Mingyu Palace. She remained cold-faced, giving off an air of being uninterested in worldly affairs. Seeing the dubious and worried expressions on the faces of Duan Yun and his companions, the female disciple scoffed and said, "This is the anti-miasma pill. Take it unless you want to be poisoned to death by the miasma. You all look so guarded, as if someone is trying to harm you. If Mingyu Palace wanted to kill, not to mention you cats and dogs, even figures renowned across the martial world could be killed at will." Duan Yun and the Murong brothers believed her words. After all, Mingyu Palace dares to provoke even a veteran like Mr. Duan, let alone a nameless young hero like him. Who wouldn't they dare to provoke? And Duan Yun also noticed that the disciples of Mingyu Palace indeed had extraordinary aspects. Even in this recruitment of servants, those who came might not be important figures of Mingyu Palace, but they could tell that both the woman in red and the old woman were powerful. Placed in an ordinary sect, they would at least be at the elder level. Even the young female disciple who came to deliver the message, though merely a menial helper, would be highly regarded in other sects, considered a promising talent with a bright future. One could simply say that based on the standard of Mingyu Palace's disciples, they were a cut above the other factions in the martial world. The competence shown by the several senior sisters from Mingyu Palace was enough to awe the Murong brothers, further proving this point. If the disciples were impressive, what about the elders and the palace master? What exactly were the ultimate skills of Mingyu Palace? The Murong brothers, as savvy old hands in the martial world, quickly verified the pills were indeed anti-miasma pills, and both they and Duan Yun quickly ingested them. It had to be said, the pill tasted sour and sweet. Duan Yun thought it somewhat resembled a snack called jigong pill that he used to enjoy in elementary school. By this time, the originally white fog had taken on a slight green tinge. It appeared Mingyu Palace had not deceived them. The place indeed contained toxic miasma. The fog, the poison gas, and the intricate waterways made Mingyu Palace genuinely hard to find. After about half an hour, the boat's speed slowed, and the fog and miasma began to dissipate gradually. "We've arrived," the stern-faced female disciple announced. The vessel stopped at a shallow beach, with a river bottom covered in pebbles. This was supposedly an island. From here, the shore was overgrown with various trees and underbrush, mundane and unremarkable. 9 out of 10 wild islands along the banks of the Yun and Yujun rivers looked just like this. Led by the old crone, their party quickly arrived at a muddy path. Walking along, Duan Yun couldn't help but widen his eyes. This was because both sides of the road were lined with corn. Ahead was a homestead framed by white walls and black tiles. After reaching the homestead, the old woman nodded and said, "From now on, this will be where you live." Duan Yun couldn't help but ask, "Is this Mingyu Palace?" "Of course, this is Mingyu Palace," the old woman answered. This reply left Duan Yun somewhat stunned. Since last winter, he had heard countless times from the Murong brothers, Shen Ying, and Fenglinger that Mingyu Palace was a sacred and forbidden place in the martial arts world. That the palace master of Mingyu Palace was a legend in the martial arts world, and the palace itself was full of intimidating female disciples who were not to be provoked or approached lightly. So in his mind, Mingyu Palace should be a place with beautiful scenery, numerous palaces, flowers, and ornamental trees, but devoid of ordinary human life. But now, this homestead and the large cornfield outside. If the homestead wasn't constructed in ancient architectural style, he would have thought it was a rural resort famed for corn and specialty grilled chicken. This was actually the sacred place of the martial world, Mingyu Palace. Especially seeing another courtyard filled with corn kernels and ears of corn hanging on the wall, Duan Yun couldn't contain himself any longer. How much did the people of Mingyu Palace love corn? The Murong brothers were also bewildered. They never imagined Mingyu Palace would be so grounded. However, they quickly came to terms with it. Living in such a place, at least they wouldn't starve. The next moment, as the old woman led them into a courtyard, a cry of pain was heard. Chapter 408. A young woman was kneeling on the ground, her hair yanked by a middle-aged woman who was slapping her repeatedly. The slaps were vicious, quickly turning the young woman's face red and purple with swelling. Yet the old woman showed no sign of stopping. Yell? Your progress in cultivation doesn't even qualify you to yell. Slapping you is a blessing for you. How dare you sleep for 3 hours yesterday? The middle-aged woman interrogated while continuing to slap her. Mrs. Fu, I was really too tired last night. I couldn't resist. With a loud smack, this slap was even more fierce, causing the young woman's nose to bleed profusely. Still talking back? Otherwise, you might as well roll back to hauling manure. Stop thinking about staying in Mingyu Palace. Is that okay? People like you should just go back to being pigs and dogs. The young woman hastily responded. Mrs. Fu, thank you for your warnings and instructions. I will definitely dedicate myself to cultivation and not let down the cultivation of Mingyu Palace. Seeing Mrs. Fu remain expressionless, the young woman continued. Mrs. Fu, I am sorry to you, sorry for the cultivation of Mingyu Palace. From now on I will only sleep for 2 hours. Also, please grant me the Fu needle to awaken me. Mrs. Fu looked at her coldly and said, That's what you said. As she spoke, a string of needles suddenly appeared in her hand. The next moment, the young woman let out a piercing scream as the needles were thrust into her shoulder, twisting painfully. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fu wore an expression of pleasure. The young woman nearly fainted from pain, but when the needles were pulled out, she still bowed and said, Thank you, Mrs. Fu, for the blessing. She staggered away, and immediately, another new female disciple came before Mrs. Fu, guiltily saying, Mrs. Fu, I have made no progress in my cultivation these past 3 days. Please grant me a blessing. With a smack, another terrifying slap sounded. A pleased expression appeared in Mrs. Fu's eyes. Seeing this, Duan Yun thought of Rong Mama but younger. Including him, all the new arrivals felt a chill down their spines. The old woman explained, This is Mrs. Fu, you'll be cultivating under her from now on. What you see is just the surface. She is also doing this for your own good. This is a valuable insight from Elder Yang of Mingyu Palace, who has mentored many disciples over the years, which is, humiliation is an art form. Humiliating and trampling on the disciple's physique and mind can stimulate their potential, helpful for understanding the cultivation technique. If you want to stay in Mingyu Palace, or even become a disciple, you'll need to push yourselves. Whether you go back and remain a hopeless civilian for a lifetime or stay here and even become a disciple of Mingyu Palace, it all depends on your performances. Watching a couple of women volunteers endure the humiliation, Duan Yun and Murong, the two heroes, found this place abominable and sinister. To make people rigorously test what Elder Yang of Mingyu Palace used was such a malicious method, practically driving people insane, and still claiming it was for their good. Duan Yun and Murong stayed on. Indeed, as they had just witnessed, the Mrs. Fu managing them was very inhuman. Upon arrival, she immediately labeled them and gave them nicknames. You look so innocent. It's no different from that job. From now on you'll be called Nameless. The woman looked at Duan Yun and said, had it not been for the need to lie low and find people, young hero Duan would probably have slapped her right away. Seeing his unconvinced expression, Mrs. Fu said, What? Don't agree? Prove it to me. If you truly have talent, then fully understand the cultivation technique and become a true disciple of Mingyu Palace. Then you'll be a goddess. Then, she turned to Morong next to him and said, Twisting and turning. Your coquettish demeanor doesn't change the fact that you're naturally an easy woman. From now on, you are born easy woman. Why are your eyes so wide? Disagree. Then prove it with your achievements. Then she turned to the next one. Smelling like a pig and with a potbelly. From now on, you'll be called Mother Pig. Duan Yun and Murong had never imagined that their first day in Mingyu Palace would be spent in a place hung with corn and resembling a farm, being verbally abused by a harsh woman. Look closely. This is the absolute skill steal of Mingyu Palace. For creatures like you to witness such a heavenly object, you are incredibly lucky. Mrs. Fu stood in front of a stele under a pavilion, proclaiming, Within this stele lies a miraculous cultivation technique. If you can comprehend it successfully, you could become a true disciple of Mingyu Palace. If not, you are what I call a waste. Mingyu Palace does not accept wastes. It has to be said, this woman's behavior truly ignited the competitive spirit of Duan Yun and the Murong brothers. Damn all these heavenly items and miraculous cultivation techniques. I want to see what this is all about. With the 1 in 10,000 supreme talent of Duan Yun and the Murong brothers, they soon got the hang of it. Yes, Duan Yun didn't even need to use his extraordinary wisdom to realize that this was, in fact, a finger technique. However, Murong brothers believed that the technique inscribed on the stele was a hand technique. Still, to avoid exposing their exceptional talent and raising suspicions, they kept a low profile and observed quietly on their own. At this moment, quite a few people had gathered in front of the stele. Adding up to about 50 or 60 people, these were presumably all the test people chosen by Mingyu Palace over the years. Among them were women who had just been slapped and pricked with needles. Duan Yun was standing just fine when suddenly a woman pushed him aside. The tall woman looked at him and mocked. A newcomer standing in such a good spot, not knowing his own weight. Then, the woman demonstrated a leg technique in front of the stele very distinguishedly. Immediately, disciples gathered around to observe. Zhao has a new insight. This leg technique is so sophisticated. While saying that, some began to draw on papers, as if trying to memorize the leg technique. Duan Yun watched the leg technique without feeling it was particularly sophisticated, yet it had some method to it. Could this woman really have comprehended a leg technique from the stele? By then, the woman had finished practicing and wore a smug expression, declaring, You can mimic all you want, you'll only scratch the surface, but that's also not bad. Duan Yun and the Murong brothers found this woman quite arrogant. Having the audacity to act so in front of geniuses like them who had unmatched cultivation talent, truly bizarre. They had already decided to find a suitable opportunity to slap her face hard, to show her what being narrow-minded, what true genius, and what extraordinary wisdom means. Then, a loud snap was heard, and suddenly the woman's face sported a deep handprint. She had slapped herself quite solidly. Following her, everyone who had been imitating also gave themselves a solid slap. One with probably weak teeth even slapped out one of their own. Good slapping. Continue. Let these newcomers know what talent is, what refinement is. Opportunities are reserved for those who are willing to suffer. With that, a group of people, as if drugged, continued to study the stele. Duan Yun and Murong brothers then realized these old-timers held hostility towards them newcomers. Her so-called opportunity meant staying in Mingyu Palace and becoming a disciple of Mingyu Palace. Previously, Mrs. Fu had already stated, every half month, the 3 slowest in progress would be eliminated. termed as Bottom 3 Elimination. These old-timers wanted to make these newcomers fail and leave. Indeed, led by Zhao, this group had persisted here for at least half a year, considering themselves the elite of the elite. Afterward, self-slapping sounds echoed intermittently. Some even took out needles to prick themselves, continuing to comprehend the steel. Duan Yun stood there, just feeling baffled. Damn, why did things suddenly become so intense? When he first arrived, he thought the elder Yang of Mingyu Palace, who turned insult into an art, was a beast exploiting test people and deserved punishment, followed by Mrs. Fu, adept at Yang's techniques in insulting and manipulating people, who also deserved retribution. These two were enemies, and these test people were just pitiful. But seeing these inexplicably hostile old-timers, he suddenly felt these people were not deserving of pity. Damn it! This place truly deserves utter destruction. Chapter 409. Top 10 Martial Skills. Extraordinary Wisdom. I command you to see through everything. Mingyu Palace, Yangli Island, surrounded by a vast field of sweet potatoes, sat a uniquely shaped palace. When night fell, the palace was lit from within. Elder Yang Li of Mingyu Palace had not yet slept. She was still concerned about cultivation techniques. Has there been any new progress with that cultivation technique? As Elder Yang Li sipped the blood-like grape wine from a night light cup and ate roasted sweet potatoes, she inquired. A female disciple respectfully bowed and responded, Elder, there's still only Zhao Yin and a few others who have grasped a leg technique. Chuning seems to have understood a breathing method, and the fist technique of the deceased Fong Yu has been verified as her own fabrication. Yang Li put down her sweet potato, picked up a pipe next to her, and exhaled clouds of smoke. Useless lot! Tell Mrs. Fu to double the portion of blessings and increase the humiliation. They still have potential to be tapped. The female disciple said, Mrs. Fu reported today that those test persons now only sleep for 2 hours a day. 2 hours? That long? A bunch of test persons aren't working hard enough. Do they have less stamina than this sweet potato skin?
Elder Yang Li challenged.
The disciple lowered her head. Half a month ago, for test persons died from exhaustion. What do you mean died from exhaustion? That's laziness. If they could comprehend the divine skill, would they die from exhaustion? Besides, having the opportunity to attempt such a divine skill is already their good fortune. They're dying as appropriate. All right, you may leave and get back to work. After the female disciple left, Elder Yang Li stood up and went to her sleeping quarters to rest. Her mood was far from pleasant, for up to now, all the cultivation techniques derived from that broken steel seemed utterly ordinary. It was no ordinary broken steel. 300 years ago, a samurai ghost from Fusang arrived, claiming to seek enlightenment in Xinzhou. Having traversed 3 states, he went on a rampage, brutally slaughtering 100 notable people and committing atrocities such as murder throughout the lands. Some victims even became his followers after the ordeal. This warrior from Japan was said to wield his blade with exceptional speed, slicing a snowflake into 16 equal parts. Moreover, it was rumored that he was possessed by a vengeful spirit, whose howling attack induced paralyzing fear in adversaries. That was why many an expert did not perish by his hand but died of sheer fright. When the other experts of Jouzhou heard the news, had they not worried about bringing disaster upon themselves, they would have avoided the situation entirely. Others, seeing that he was still far from their territories and doubting their own ability, chose to stay out of it and watch from a distance. Some, with impulsive temperaments, confronted him and were swiftly dispatched without making much difference. For a time, Jouzhou, a place famed for its multitude of experts, could find no one willing to challenge the edge of this Japanese warrior. At this juncture, an unknown martial artist emerged from the great mountains, self-titled the Tenfold Exterminator. The Tenfold Exterminator looked unremarkable, akin to a woodcutter, yet he managed to defeat the fearsome samurai ghost, leaving him wailing miserably. It was said that the warrior from Japan was ultimately torn into 10 pieces and perished, never again to see the cherry blossoms of his homeland. Following this battle, the Tenfold Exterminator's fame spread far and wide, and many from the martial world even nominated him as the Martial Arts Alliance hierarch. But then, just like that, he vanished into thin air, treating fame and distinction as mere dust. Later, Jianghu people would catch occasional glimpses of him, as elusive as a dragon spotted only in glimpses. And this broken steel, it was Elder Yang Li of Mingyu Palace who accidentally discovered it in a desolate tomb, specially commissioning a thorough investigation, only to realize it was left by the tenfold exterminator, inscribed with his martial arts. However, the martial arts of the tenfold exterminator were no ordinary skills, and being inscribed on a broken steel, one would risk possession by demons when attempting to practice them. Later, disciples of Mingyu Palace were made to try, but confined by their own existing martial arts or inherent caution, they barely grasped anything. According to the unwritten rules of Jianghu, Elder Yang Li steadily sought out promising test persons. These test persons were blank slates, who under her destroying body and mind skills, strived unusually hard, in hopes of carving out a path for her success. In reality, the Mingyu skills of Mingyu Palace were already exceedingly rare and exceptional, yet they demand too much from a person's nature and talent. Yang Li believed that even with double the effort in 2 lifetimes, she couldn't achieve the heights of the past palace masters. Hence, she sought an alternative approach in this regard. In fact, Mingyu Palace was not as stagnantly self-contained as the outside world imagined, as many of its martial arts were extrapolated from other methods. One of the great utilities of Mingyu skills was to assimilate others' techniques and innovate anew. For instance, the broken branch hand of Mingyu Palace evolved from the big eagle-in hand of the inner palace, and after being reinterpreted by a former palace master of the Jade Palace, it became not only more graceful and elegant but also more insidious and deceptive than the big eagle-in hand. Yang Li was well aware that within the Mingyu Palace's own martial arts, she could no longer improve, yet the tenfold exterminator's broken steel offered new possibilities. What frustrated her most was that, since acquiring the steel, no less than 100 test persons had died without notable progress. What a bunch of useless waste. Such a drain on the corn and sweet potatoes of Mingyu Palace. Speaking of sweet potatoes, the disciple of Mingyu Palace who had just left Yang Li did not return to her dwelling but went to the fields to plant sweet potatoes instead. The people of Jianghu only knew the women of Mingyu Palace to be terrifying, that even a lowly servant within could kill without batting an eye, unaware that these coldly fearsome fairies, in the eyes of demons, had to till the fields within Mingyu Palace, planting corn, planting sweet potatoes. Especially the faction under Elder Yang Li's jurisdiction paid particular attention to this task. According to Yang Li, only when both body and mind are on the path, one can achieve true success. Chapter 4:10. While she slept, her disciples were tilling the fields. Test persons were testing their skills. While she was savoring grape wine and eating sweet potatoes, her disciples were likely still laboring away in the fields. This is also why the disciples of Mingyu Palace tend to display particularly ruthless methods when they are away from home. They would never tell outsiders that they often have to manure the fields. The long-standing resentment could only be vented on those who incited their wrath. Of course, if no one dared to provoke them outside, they would select innocent people to strike upon. In the dead of night, Duan Yun and the Murong brothers lay in bed. Murong brothers were quite disappointed, as the scene they had imagined of living and eating with their female fellow disciples did not unfold. Due to their long-standing perseverance along with old demon Duan, drowsiness engulfed them, and they had washed up and gone to bed, while the others were still engrossed in comprehension and practicing martial arts, like machines. Among the 8 people selected for this task, aside from one who seemed hypoglycemic and was resting in the next room, the rest had all been indoctrinated. Damn, just one day. Even though Duan Yun and the Murong brothers were lying down, they still had the uncanny feeling that if they didn't work hard, they would be whipped or pricked with a needle. This truly was not a life meant for humans. Linger, do you have any lead on that steel? Asked the Murong brothers. Duan Murong, do you have any leads? Duan Yun replied. At this point, the Murong brothers lowered their voice and said, I think it's a hand technique. Duan Yun responded, I think it looks more like a finger technique. How do you figure? You're not tricking yourself, are you? The Murong brothers challenged. Duan Yun asserted confidently. Are you questioning my one-in-a-million talent? Previously full of confidence, the Murong brothers faced Duan Yun and instantly lowered their proud heads, resembling a defeated rooster. In terms of talent, he was still but slightly inferior to old demon Duan. Duan Yun then asked, "Have you managed to gather any intelligence?" The Murong brothers replied, "I only found out from the cook that Mingyu Palace is vast. There are supposed to be 3 islands. Each island is riddled with traps, and without a guide, it is easy to stumble into danger." Duan Yun nodded and said, "If that's the case, we can't alert our enemies when rescuing people. We can only rely on our talent for now and blend in further. As it stands, we can hardly even count as outer disciples." This manor surrounded by cornfields undoubtedly seemed to be at the fringe of Mingyu Palace. "Yes, but we mustn't be too hasty or we'll draw suspicion." At this, the Murong brothers clenched their fists slightly. They were unaware if his beloved Ningqing and sister Ziyu, who had been captured, were being tormented. After all, judging by Mrs. Fu's methods, one could deduce that Mingyu Palace was proficient in torturing and punishing people. "Do you think it might be the elder?" asked Duan Yun. Lost in thought, the Murong brothers said, "From what we see, the elder wields substantial authority. Even if it isn't her, it's unlikely anything could be kept hidden from her. All right, our next move is to proceed with caution and vigilance. We must seize the opportunity to approach her and defeat her swiftly, forcing her to plead on her knees and wet herself, so that she'll provide us with clues or release the captives. It's best if I could infuse some heroic spirit into her to avoid any lies." Duan Yun spoke with earnest seriousness. His words suggested caution and vigilance, yet they were drastically brutal, even stirring an adrenaline rush. Indeed, it was just their first day, and they already wished to severely undermine that elder who believed insulting is an art form. All right, then we'll gradually decipher the steel and find an opportunity to meet the elder. Afterward, they closed their eyes and started sleeping. In the middle of the night, people began to trickle back in. The Murong brothers and Duan Yun continued to slumber. Zhao, who had demonstrated the leg technique earlier, came back and saw Duan Yun and the Murong brothers lying there, and remarked, "These 2 flirts just arrived and already like this. They're sure to be kicked out this month." Saying so, she indignantly went to bed. She only needed 1 hour of sleep. 1 hour was enough for her for the day. When her eyes blurred, she felt she had entered a profound state. Yes, she was so close, just a little more and she would probably grasp something new. Zhao Yin closed her bloodshot eyes, thinking such thoughts. When Duan Yun and the Murong brothers had fallen asleep tired, not many people were around, but by the time they woke up, there were hardly any people around. This was because when they had gone to sleep, the others were deeply engrossed in understanding and practicing their kung fu. By the time they woke up, the group had already risen and resumed their training. It could be said that if they had a quota of 2 hours of sleep previously, now it was decidedly less than 2 hours. The atmosphere is mainly what got to them. These test people all want to stay in Mingyu Palace, to become disciples rather than being eliminated in the last 3 places. Indeed, some have actually managed to cultivate their kung fu to the satisfaction of the elders amidst this frenzied training, becoming disciples of Mingyu Palace. Who are the disciples of Mingyu Palace? They are the ones in the martial world who can kill anyone they please, slay your own mother, and you still have to bear it with gratitude and tears. This is undoubtedly a huge temptation. This also leads to everyone not wanting to be eliminated and no one daring to take a proper rest. So when Duan Yun and the Murong brothers woke up, they were met with Mrs. Fu's icy stare. "Slept enough?" greeted Mrs. Fu. Hearing this greeting early in the morning made Duan Yun and the Murong brothers boil with rage. "If it weren't for having to save someone, I'd let you see what happens when you call the nameless young hero a bitch. If it weren't for saving someone, I would have told you a surprise." At that moment, Duan Yun and the Murong brothers thought the same thing simultaneously. They still swallowed their pride, got up and replied, "We slept well. With the likes of you, you're sure to get the boot this month." Didn't I tell you yesterday that Mingyu Palace doesn't support the useless? Did you just let it go in one ear and out the other? With your appearance, don't even think about comprehending divine skill to become an elite disciple of Mingyu Palace. It's better to work in a brothel and earn some money while you're young. The woman cursed more abusively with each word, but Duan Yun and the Murong brothers encouraged each other to endure. You damn dog, you only get to swagger around for a maximum of 10 more days. 10 days shouldn't be too conspicuous. After that, I'll make you understand what it means when the young hero returns. Duan Yun had it remembered, not only to make the great elder kneel and wet himself but also to make this cursing mad woman do the same, and jab her with her own needle 100 times. Even if it's to save someone, the deed must be done along the way. The wise would know to come to me for blessings, just afraid some won't be so wise, Mrs. Fu said loudly. But Duan Yun and the Murong brothers remained unwise, simply ate some porridge and headed for the steel. Instead, those who had been struggling to understand the cultivation technique, thinking that Mrs. Fu was summoning them, hurried over to receive slaps and needle pricks. Duan Yun and the Murong brothers watched this and thought all of them were damn foolish. All complete fools. This practically driving people to become ghosts. So the two secretly decided, 7 days. In 7 days, they wanted to reasonably comprehend the cultivation technique to earn a chance to see the great elder. And then, thinking of this, both Duan Yun and the Murong brothers couldn't help but snort lightly. Even after so many times of chivalrous deeds, this was their first time being so desperate for this kind of thing. At this time, the two stood in front of the steel again. The moves on the steel meshed together, resembling but not resembling a person, as if the steel itself had blurred from wind frost, or as if there were many afterimages. Duan Yun still felt that it was a finger technique, while Murong brothers still felt it was a hand technique. Both had preliminarily entered the threshold, but still did not manifest it. It wasn't until dusk that the Murong brothers first began to initiate the hand technique. He had gone over this hand technique countless times in his mind, but to appear less talented, he deliberately performed it clumsily. With each thrust of his palm, he made sure his fake breasts rippled as much as possible, reinforcing the belief of those around him that he was a jerk. But Duan Yun saw through the act. This was indeed a hand technique with patterns to it. But what he saw, too, was a finger technique with patterns to it. And the leg technique practiced by the one surnamed Zhao was also becoming increasingly forceful. What was going on? Extraordinary wisdom. I command you to see through everything. Duan Yun stared at the steel, eyes shining, and couldn't help thinking to himself. Chapter 411. Extraordinary wisdom. Let me see where your limits are. With Duan Yun's extraordinary wisdom twinkling, he quickly finished reading the hand technique of Murong brothers. Then he mastered it. Immediately after, he turned his attention to Zhao Yin, who was intentionally showing off her leg technique to pressure the surrounding people. After watching once, he mastered it as well. The next moment, he began to display Zhao Yin's leg technique. Seeing this, Zhao Yin couldn't help but sneer. Dreaming in broad daylight, thinking you can learn my skills now? Too late. However, gradually, her expression became serious. Because Duan Yun's execution of the leg technique became smoother and smoother, only slightly worse than hers, who were far better than her dumb followers. All things considered, in her eyes, Duan Yun had mastered some essence of her technique. Usually, it was fine if her followers learned a little. But Duan Yun had quickly mastered quite a bit, which unbalanced her mentally. Thief! Stealing my leg technique! Zhao Yin scolded. Duan Yun snickered, retorting, I comprehended this from the steel right here. What, you think you're the only one who can comprehend it? You! Shameless! Zhao Yin trembled with anger, sinking into despair. Your leg technique is full of errors. Your breathing rhythm and steps are off. You'll encounter problems sooner or later. By then, she regretted demonstrating the leg technique in front of Duan Yun and deliberately said those things to mislead him. Duan Yun ignored her and swiftly started demonstrating a set of hand techniques. This hand technique quickly became coherent, flowing like water, and even though Duan Yun suppressed his dantian, It was still lively and beautiful. Seeing this, Murong brothers couldn't help but secretly lament. This damn guy is even stealing mine? Seeing that Duan Yun's hand technique was also impressive, Zhao Yin's followers couldn't help but secretly start learning it. If Zhao Yin weren't there, they might have already taken out notebooks to jot notes. It wasn't easy to stay in the Mingyu Palace, and as the saying goes, the more skills, the better the security, the more they could learn, the better. They also wanted to become superior people, to be true disciples of Mingyu Palace, to rise above others. After finishing his practice, Duan Yun stopped to rest. Seeing this, Murong brothers couldn't help but sneak over, asking, "What about the finger technique you comprehended?" Duan Yun glanced at him, replying, "It's in my mind." Murong brothers asked, "How is it?" "I'm not going to demonstrate it yet," Duan Yun answered. Seeing him secretly learn 2 martial arts without sharing his own, Murong brothers couldn't help but complain, "You really are sly." Duan Yun just smiled charmingly, unbothered. In his mind, with the boon of extraordinary wisdom, 3 martial arts were operating simultaneously. A fist technique, a leg technique, a finger technique. If extraordinary wisdom was just about simple copying of moves, that would be too low-end. And while these 3 martial arts seemed quite structured and colorful when performed, and could serve as the ultimate skills for medium and small sects in the martial world, for a master like him, they were quite plain. Mingyu Palace put so much effort into tests, the techniques on this steel were definitely not that simple. There must be other secrets. Thus, Duan Yun's gaze sharpened. Extraordinary wisdom. Let me see where your limits lie. Afterward, he closed his eyes, focusing intently on comprehending these 3 cultivation techniques. An hour later, he opened his eyes. Murong brothers hurried over, asking, "What did you comprehend?" Duan Yun said, "I need to pee." Damn! If it weren't for his current delicate lady's identity, Murong brothers would probably have cursed it out loud. "Let's go together." With that, the 2 beauties headed towards the latrine. Duan Yun had to admit, the martial art being tested by Mingyu Palace was not simple. Even with his extraordinary wisdom, he hadn't deciphered its secrets in an hour. Truly profound martial arts. He might really have to stay up all night. The latrine of Mingyu Palace was on the outskirts of the manor, from where one could see a large cornfield. Since there were others in the latrine, including that previous stern-faced disciple of Mingyu Palace, to avoid exposure, Duan Yun and Murong brothers could only squat to pee. While peeing, a sudden flash of extraordinary wisdom made Duan Yun's stream smoother. "I get it." He hurriedly stood and adjusted his skirt, only to see the stern-faced disciple of Mingyu Palace also getting up, looking indifferently at him. Duan Yun swore it was his first time in a women's restroom in his 2 lifetimes. To save someone, he, the nameless young hero, had to endure such humiliation. After reaching adulthood, he still had to squat to pee. All thanks to Murong brothers. If he had listened to him initially and stormed Mingyu Palace, he wouldn't need to be so sneaky. Of course, Duan Yun kept these thoughts to himself. Because he knew Murong brothers, moved by Ning Qing, had become rather fragile, so he had to take good care of his feelings. After leaving the latrine, he and Murong brothers continued their way back. It was about time for lunch, but the dining hall was empty. He heard that the people here were very diligent and seldom sat down for meals. Even if hungry, they ate while testing their skills. Because Mrs. Fu had said, how could someone without achievements calmly eat? Duan Yun was at ease, since he had made some progress. Here, it seemed there wasn't much of anything except for plenty of corn. Thus, Duan Yun and Murong brothers began to roast corn. The aroma of roasting corn quickly spread throughout the manor. Soon, people started to sneak peeks. Murong brothers hurriedly kept low, and then they heard someone passing a message. Mrs. Fu, it's those 2 vixens, daring to eat lunch in broad daylight. Chapter 412. Why would anyone skip lunch to eat dinner at noon? Even Murong, being an old riverside, had never encountered such an oppressive environment. Having lunch at noon and still getting tipped off about it? Duan Yun found it even more absurd. In his past life, snitching meant sneaking out to surf the internet. Nowadays, even eating a roasted corn at noon could be reported. However, Duanyun and Murong were not affected at all, because they were geniuses. They had already figured out the steal, not clueless like the others. Murong asked, "Apart from these 3 martial arts, did you really not see anything else?" Duanyun said, "These 3 martial arts, just looking at your hand technique, when you connect them, what do you feel? What do you feel when you connect them? It's just a hand technique. It seems to be just that." Speaking, Murong's hands started moving involuntarily. He practiced once and still had no clue. "What does it mean exactly?" Murong asked. "It can only be understood, not conveyed in words," Duanyun said. After finishing their corn, the 2 continued to the steal. At this time, Murong looked slightly pained. It was obvious that Duanyun had realized something more, but he had not. Keeping up with old Demon Duan's pace was indeed too hard. If it weren't for looking around and seeing a bunch of fools even worse than him, he might have even doubted his 1 in 10,000 talent. At night, Duanyun went to sleep. Murong was still staring at the steal. Thus, Duanyun was the first and only drama king to go to bed. Even natural drama kings started to roll up their sleeves. Just when Duanyun was soundly asleep, someone shook him awake. The moment he opened his eyes, he saw Murong's enchanting face. "What are you doing?" Duanyun asked. "I've realized it," Murong exclaimed excitedly. "What have you realized?" "Hand intent. I just practiced my hand technique forcefully twice, and noticed a thought entering my mind, as if refining my spirit. You said at noon it can only be understood, not conveyed. The intent you mentioned is the hand intent. This hand technique appears ordinary, yet it can gather hand intent, refining the martial will of a practitioner," Murong asserted confidently. He indeed was a genius. He had uncovered the mystery of this hand technique. "What else?" Duanyun said. "What else? What you've realized now, I realized while urinating, and now I am beyond that," Duanyun said nonchalantly. His extraordinary wisdom just told him in a dream that the cultivation technique on the steal was not simply about emphasizing intent over moves. "Have you realized something again?" Murong's eyes turned red. To think that such a genius like him could only keep up with old Demon Duan's pace before lunch. Though accustomed to it, he still couldn't help but want to blurt out, "This man is terrifying indeed." Duanyun consoled him, "Don't be discouraged. Keeping up with my morning concepts already shows the stature of a grandmaster. If someone like me has the stature of a grandmaster, what are you?" "Of course, the overlord among grandmasters." "What's that?" "Dominate the world." "Damn it." Even as a beautiful girl, Murong couldn't help but swear. Though anxious about not keeping up with old Demon Duan's pace, he still managed to courageously ask, "Any hints?" Duanyun said, "Since hand technique, finger technique, and leg technique are all about intent, what's their difference and similarity? You haven't shown me your finger technique yet. That's your problem. But I have already shown you my leg technique. That's still not my problem." Seeing Murong's face turning red, Duanyun could only demonstrate his finger technique once. Murong memorized this finger technique firmly and was ready to go out again. Duanyun said, "Why aren't you sleeping? Utterly surpass you, you pure seductress." Duanyun watched Murong brothers leave, feeling this place was truly bizarre. It could really turn a person into a ghost. You see, a person like Murong who could lie corpse for days without turning over, is now not sleeping at all, planning to stay up all night to surpass me in practicing the cultivation technique. It's truly outrageous. Sigh. I had planned to stay up all night too. Forget it. Even if I fell asleep, extraordinary wisdom will still work and give me dreams. Extraordinary wisdom. Keep operating. As Duanyun spoke, he lay down and fell asleep again. In the early morning, Murong brothers came back, their eyes bloodshot. While others needed to sleep for 2 hours, he hadn't slept for even 1, all to catch up with old Demon Duan. Unfortunately, Murong couldn't help but sigh. "No more. I really need to sleep." At this moment, Duan Yun opened his eyes, stretched lazily, and his first words were, "I have realized it." Hearing this, Murong, who had just lain down, suddenly sat up stiffly like a corpse, astonished. "What else have you realized now?" Duan Yun said, "I have grasped the mystery of that steel. This should be enough to meet the elder now. But to be cautious, I still shouldn't reveal too much too soon." Murong took a deep breath. "I don't believe it. You were clearly deep asleep." He had just roughly figured out the finger technique and hand technique, not yet fully mastering the leg technique. Mainly because Zhao Yin, that stinky lady, became cautious and stopped showing off after Duan Yun stole her techniques. He was extremely tired, just wanted to come back to catch his breath, and sleep for half an hour before continuing. But this fellow claims to see through everything after sleeping. Dream on. Who says one can't realize truth while sleeping? Have you never heard of Zhuangzi dreaming of a butterfly? As long as there's wisdom, you can realize the truth in dreams. Duan Yun explained earnestly. What he said was true. During his sleep, the extraordinary wisdom integrated all he had previously perceived, allowing him to see through everything. Indeed, he still hasn't fully exhausted the potential of the extraordinary wisdom. Duan Yun's explanation seemed far-fetched. Extremely far-fetched. However, Murong knew this guy was always far-fetched. From the first moment he met this guy at Yuzhu Villa, he had been unsettled by his illogical ways. Or rather, this guy was inherently mad, making this world seem a bit crazier. Zhuangzi dreaming of a butterfly? Realizing the truth through sleep? Why don't you say sleeping with a woman can also lead to enlightenment? Anyone else saying such things would surely be deemed a lunatic. But coming from Duan Yun, it made Murong feel a sense of absurd truth. Could he truly possess extraordinary wisdom? Murong, looking at a refreshed and clear-headed Duan Yun upon waking, still disbelieved, shaking his head. "I don't believe it, unless you show it to me." He had always known that the path of martial arts was not fair. The difference between individuals was even greater than that between humans and pigs. But Murong refused to be that pig. Duan Yun pondered, "Then we need to find a relatively secluded place to do it, as it involves the use of true qi." So, without even sparing half an hour to sleep, Murong followed Duan Yun, secretly crawling through the latrine to an unattended cornfield. "Are you sure you want to see?" Duan Yun asked, standing in the cornfield. "Certain. You shouldn't see it. But I insist. If not for both dressing as women and truly demonstrating martial arts, any uninformed individual would suspect they were up to something shady in the cornfield. Seeing it comes with consequences." "What consequences can't I endure?" Murong confidently said. Countless nights lying under the bed, enduring endless sorrow, entwined like vines with endless hatred, had already forged his unyielding spirit. "All right then, I'll indulge you." Speaking, Duan Yun used his left palm, right finger, and kicked out with his left leg. These were the three martial arts techniques grasped by different people from the steel, now simultaneously executed by Duan Yun. At the same time, Murong witnessed three different hand intents. These three intents, distinct from each other, suddenly merged together. And then he saw a crane, an immortal crane spreading its wings. Not only did it represent the blending of hand intent and true qi, but also very fine hairs. The body hair that Duan Yun, previously disguised as a woman, had shaved, but which had grown back. In the next instant, Murong fell to the ground, emitting a painful noise. He was defeated by old demon Duan's body hair. What kind of cultivation technique was this? Chapter 413. Murong, young hero, also wants to impart martial arts to the martial world. Murong brothers collapsed in the cornfield, struggling in intense pain. He was struck by Duan Yun's immortal crane-like body hair, not only feeling a scorching pain but also an itch that seemed to emanate from his very viscera. No longer daring to hold anything back, he opened up all the fire power in his dantian, true qi raging wildly, trying to force out these hairs. But these hairs were peculiar. In the process of being forced out, they would twist, bringing an even more intense pain and itchiness. By the time Murong brothers forced out these needle-like fine hairs, He was drenched in sweat and felt as if he had lost half his life. It seemed he was left abandoned in this cornfield after the deed was done. He had never imagined a person's body hair could be this terrifying. "What cultivation technique is this?" gasped Morong Brothers heavily. "Let's temporarily call it Immortal Crane Divine Needle," replied Duan Yun. "But these are clearly your hairs." Although Morong Brothers said this, he had to admit that the name was quite fitting. The Immortal Crane Divine Needle was frightening not only because of the scorching pain and itching sensation it brought, but also because it was extremely difficult to defend against. Morong Brothers knew he had been careless, but when the crane intent appeared, he felt it was so celestial and beautiful, like a real immortal crane spreading its wings. And while he was still admiring the beauty of it, he was struck. After Duan Yun's body hair turned into needles, they were thin and fast. Even focusing entirely on defense would not be easy, let alone when one's attention could easily be drawn away by the beauty of the immortal crane. Even now, he hadn't managed to stand up, saying, "Your hair is strange. I feel so tired and weak." Thinking of himself, a robust man who had preserved his vitality for over 20 years, he now felt utterly drained. He had clearly forced out these hairs. Duan Yun explained, "You must have used up a great deal of mental energy when you were pricked by the needles, indicating that your will is not strong enough." Morong Brothers exclaimed in shock, "I am not strong enough? You have no idea how painful it was to be hit by your hairs. It was almost enough to torment someone to death with pain and itchiness." To this moment, just the thought of the previous experience made Morong Brothers shiver from the cold. "What kind of immortal crane divine needle is this? It's practically King Yan's life and death talisman." Morong Brothers couldn't help but quietly complain. It was said that King Yan's life and death talisman did not determine life and death, but was a kind of curse that made one unable to live or die, as if being tortured at any given moment. And Duan Yun's move truly felt like that, truly worthy of being called Old Demon Duan. After being brutally beaten by Old Demon Duan's new cultivation technique, the fight in Morong Brothers had dissipated. He admitted to himself that even if his talent for cultivation were to double, he wouldn't be able to catch up to Duan Yun. How was it possible to dream for one night and come up with such a terrifying cultivation technique? Is this still human? Fortunately, as a master with abundant true qi, he was barely able to force out these hairs. What if he couldn't have forced them out? Morong Brothers could already imagine those people in excruciating pain and itchiness, scratching themselves to death in torture if they could not find a better way to commit suicide. Isn't this a living Yama? Morong wanted to become this living Yama as well so he could properly deal with the evil demons, especially those who dared to harm Ning Qing and his sister. All of them must be properly taken care of. Thus, he shamelessly asked, "How exactly did you train to achieve this?" Duan Yun explained, "The characters on that stele seem blurry, as if there are double images, but in fact, that's not double imaging. It's the overlapping combination of different intents. The three intents are not separate. In my eyes, the hand intent you see is powerful, like an unfolding feather crane. My finger intent is light and agile, like the body of a crane, and the leg technique is like the crane's feet. Together with my brain of extraordinary wisdom, I was able to understand that the combination of these intents makes up the immortal crane. The intent on this stele should not be limited to these three, and may also hide intent beyond the immortal crane, but unfortunately, it is incomplete and severely so. I seriously suspect it to be just a small part of the original martial arts, and can only say that the martial arts contained in this stele are not simple and the martial insights are profound. Let's see if I can use my extraordinary wisdom to complete some of it in the future." Morong Brothers' eyes lit up, his blood boiling. The incomplete version is already so powerful. What about the complete one? Unexpectedly, in this testing ground of Mingyu Palace, such divine skill could be hidden. As people of the martial world, none lacked aspiration toward divine skill. Even if Morong Brothers were odd enough to put beautiful women and his sister first, divine skill could still firmly occupy the second place in his heart. He wanted to comprehend it as well, but as soon as he thought of his sisters, one a beloved younger sister Ning Qing, and the other most likely his blood-related sister Ziyu, he immediately calmed down. Now that we have comprehended to this extent, the head elder should want to see us. But it's only been 2 or 3 days, and we've already unraveled the secrets. She will definitely suspect us. Indeed, they had locked their dantian. Ordinary disciples of Mingyu Palace couldn't see or test it out. If it were the elder at that level, if she truly wanted to test them, she would definitely be able to figure it out. Duan Yun nodded and said, "Therefore, we can't tell the whole truth. Then what should we do?" Murong brothers continued to shamelessly ask. Get everything wrong in the process but the result correct. Or skip the process entirely, just show the result. Duan Yun replied. Upon hearing this, Murong brothers blinked. Then he gave Duan Yun a thumbs up. It had to be you. If they really did as Duan Yun suggested, the head elder would most likely think that they had stumbled upon dumb luck, accidentally perceiving the subtleties, rather than deducing it through an out-of-this-world perceptiveness. The two briefly conspired. Such an accident should not happen to both of them at the same time. Chapter 4:14. Both people hit the jackpot. This is too coincidental. Thus, this difficult task was assigned to Duan Yun. After Duan Yun and Murong returned, they saw the people in the manor looking grave, giving them strange looks. If previously only Zhao Yin and his group were hostile towards them, now it seemed like everyone was displeased with them. What's wrong? Could it be? I've always known this day would come. Duan Linger and I are just too pretty and being envied. Murong couldn't help but think. Being a natural flirt and social butterfly, Murong immediately went to inquire and found out for some unknown reason the usual bottom 3 elimination, which happens at the end of the month, had been moved up to the 15th. That's the day after tomorrow. Meaning Duan Yun and the others, who had just arrived 5 days ago, had to participate in the elimination. The people here harbored hostility towards Duan Yun and Murong because they thought these two were too lazy and performed too poorly, marking the worst performance by newcomers in history, annoying Mrs. Fu and causing the bottom 3 elimination to be moved up. But the ones panicking were the others. Because those present yesterday know, Duan Linger secretly learned Zhao Yin's leg technique and Murong's hand technique, mastering them impressively, while Murong even developed a new hand technique on his own. These two, one stole 2 techniques, and the other developed one himself. They weren't without skills. Instead, those being eliminated were the diligent ones who had nothing to show. They worked so hard but would be ousted early because of these 2 lazy ones. It annoyed everyone. Duan Yun and Murong being isolated was something they had hoped for. Although Murong felt slightly regretful about not being able to bond deeply with the female disciples and share sisterly activities like peeing and bathing together, it was only a slight feeling. After all, Murong had someone he liked. He wouldn't flirt around unless he couldn't help it. And as the young master of the Murong family, Murong sometimes might look desperate and sleazy, but his standards were not low. Of those who came to test their skills, not many were attractive, and he really wasn't interested. The most beautiful girl is the best under the heaven. It must start with beauty. However, some among the group didn't see it this way, especially Zhao Yin and those veteran figures. The martial world is both deceitful and murderous, yet full of human warmth. This early arrival of bottom 3 was clearly because of the improper attitudes of Duan Linger and Duan Murong, which annoyed Mrs. Fu. They all knew Mrs. Fu was someone whose mind was smaller than the eye of a needle. Annoy her and who else would be eliminated but you? The martial world was inherently unfair. Being useful doesn't mean you'll be utilized. Offend those above and wish for good days? Wait until you're forced to leave in disgrace. Having offended Mrs. Fu, what use is your bit of cleverness? Besides, Duan Linger, that innocent flirt, even her moves were stolen, let alone any genuine perception. Zhao Yin and the others were certain. This premature bottom 3 elimination was specifically meant for Duan Linger and Duan Murong. Thinking of the flirt who stole his moves being kicked out, Zhao Yin couldn't help but snort lightly. Duan Yun and Murong were isolated, quietly waiting for the bottom 3 elimination. They knew, to reveal some of their skills, this was the best and most natural opportunity. Duan Yun continued to dine and rest on schedule, living as if he were a health-conscious old cadre. Zhao Yin became even more convinced that this flirt was definitely doomed, because he saw anger in Mrs. Fu's eyes. The night before the bottom three, Morong found Duan Yun and said, "I've tried your method many times. Why do I perceive it to be a white tiger?" White tiger? Duan Yun pondered and said, "This cultivation technique is already incomplete. I even suspect the complete technique originally stemmed from various beasts, so sensing a white tiger isn't particularly strange." Morong added, "I also thought the white tiger looked pretty good, just like a maiden." He had a slightly sleazy smile as he spoke. Duan Yun couldn't help but look shocked. Has this guy succumbed to lovesickness, going mad? How could he even spare a tiger? As Morong's good brother, Duan Yun worried about him becoming obsessed, so he quickly asked, "Did you try to manifest the white tiger?" "Not yet. I've just sensed the white tiger recently. That's why I wanted to consult with you," Morong replied. Finally, he could show old Demon Duan his talented results. Morong was so thrilled when he first sensed the white tiger. The white tiger just sounded way more imposing than any immortal crane. Duan Yun was also a bit interested in the white tiger and couldn't help reminding on the way, "Take it easy later. Don't disturb anyone and blow our cover." "Don't worry. I'll only use a little bit." Morong nodded. There was no helping it. The white tiger often represented fierceness, its roar echoing through the mountains. The two then sneaked into an empty cornfield. Once they made sure no one was around, Morong began his demonstration. He started with his hand technique, followed by Duan Yun's finger technique, and then the leg technique they had barely managed to steal these past few days. But unlike Duan Yun, who could execute the three martial arts simultaneously, Morong performed them sequentially. First the hand technique, then focused on finger technique, followed by the leg technique. It didn't look spectacular. Any fairly skilled martial artist could achieve this. A Lost Kingdom's prince once mastered over 1,000 martial arts, considering himself capable of embracing all streams, boundless and profound. A prodigy who aspired to dominate the martial world first, then gradually restore his nation. However, he soon got caught by the mad woman of Red House after just stepping into the martial world, who forced him to entertain her using his 1,000 martial arts and got assaulted in the process. After displaying all his 1,000 martial arts, he ended up a yang energy-wasted cripple, his hope of restoring his nation lost, turning him into a martial world's running joke. Morong's performance of the cultivation techniques was ordinary, but just then, the air around started to whirl, shaking the corn. Afterward, Duan Yun faintly saw an image of a white tiger. Most outrageously, it looked just as Morong described, even resembling a beautiful girl. "Tiger strike!" Morong threw out a palm. Duan Yun was not as careless as Morong. He was already focused, ready to defend, because he felt the girl-like white tiger was very bizarre, even spooky. A delicate tiger's roar sounded. Indeed, Duan Yun swore he had never heard such a delicate tiger's roar before. It somewhat intimidated the soul like a tiger's roar, yet it more so resembled a cat in heat. The next instant, Morong's palm force pushed forward but then dissipated in midair. It shifted from pushing forward to plummeting downward. And that plummet was towards the crotch. After that, Morong stood still. "What's wrong?" Duan Yun asked. Morong withdrew his hand and said, "Strange, very strange. I haven't mastered it yet. We'll practice next time." At that moment, Duan Yun seriously suspected that the downward thrusting palm force had blasted out this poor fellow's feces, causing him to urgently leave. "Did you just soil yourself?" Duan Yun asked. "Go fly a kite. Do I look like I just soiled myself?" replied Morong indignantly. Duan Yun checked. Indeed, there was no sign of such an incident. After all, there was no wetness nor smell. "Let's rest today, we still have the last 3 ranks tomorrow. I'll show you once I've mastered it," Morong said. At night, Duan Yun peeked for a while, making sure Morong was fine. He hadn't even changed his trousers. However, Morong was gritting his teeth in anger. "Dad, you've set me up again." Indeed, when his palm force plummeted, he hadn't made a mess, but he did lose some hair. He kinda understood why. The essence of the white tiger he perceived resembled a beautiful girl, most likely linked to him sneaking a peek at his father's picture book when he was a child. That picture book had a strong impact on his young mind, the plot and details still vivid to him even now. Lucky he had used only 10% of his power. If he had gone full force, he surely would have ended up as White Tiger Young Hero. So in secret, Murong harbored a malicious plan. These people in Mingyu Palace aren't nice, they even snatched my girl. If I spread this technique, they too should lose every hair. Thus, Murong said to Duan Yun, Duan Linger, tomorrow at the last 3 ranks, I was supposed to use your immortal crane. How about trying my white tiger? Duan Yun nodded. Not much of a difference, actually. Your white tiger does sound more intimidating. We will see how it goes. All right. Murong shook his pants, said excitedly. At that moment, he suddenly felt very exhilarated about this whole thing. He, Murong Young Hero, was about to pass on martial skills. Chapter 415. No one can refuse divine skill. Early morning, the test persons stood in a line, respectfully. Duan Yun and Murong stood among them, looking like mere followers. This Mrs. Fu, who showed her vicious and ferocious nature upon first meeting, was even more eager to show off her strengths today. Her favorite part was the last 3 positions, which she greatly enjoyed. She delighted in seeing these people being scolded and nitpicked, especially those 3 who were humiliated and then driven out. Their heartbroken expressions gave her utmost pleasure. Now, Mrs. Fu was going all out, practicing Elder Yang's insults are an art form. Some test persons were even harshly prodded on the spot, contorting their bodies in pain, drooling. Yet these people were actually elated and happy. Being prodded by Mrs. Fu meant that she still cared about you. It was for your own good, ensuring you wouldn't be eliminated. On the other hand, those who weren't prodded were terrified and trembling in fear. You born bitch, come out here, Mrs. Fu muttered. After waiting for a long time, Murong stepped forward, his face determined. It's as if the heavens did not give birth to Murong. The path of the white tiger would be eternally dark. Today, right here today, he was about to use this place as his starting point to promote the way of the white tiger to greater heights, not knowing what the outcome would be. You, covered in the dust of the world, being able to come here is already a blessing. But you are a reckless person, sleeping at night, eating lunch at noon, being lazy to go to the toilet without any ambition. Saying so, Mrs. Fu put away the needle that was still dripping blood after being used just now, revealing a tired expression and said, Someone like you, I'm even too lazy to prod. Hearing this, the woman who had just been prodded, still in pain, suddenly puffed up her proud chest. Mrs. Fu prods me, indeed she favors me. Look out for me. Mrs. Fu put away the needle and waved her hand. I don't like you. The Great Elder doesn't like you. Mingyu Palace doesn't like you. You aren't fit to stay here. Murong puffed out his chest formed by the secret technique of Shining, confidently saying, But I have achieved results in my cultivation. Results? Your 3-legged cat kung fu could also be called results? Don't dirty my eyes, Mrs. Fu said in disgust. Seeing the other party was being unreasonable, Murong quickly displayed his hand technique. His dantian was locked, and although he performed smoothly and forcefully, in Duan Yun's eyes, because it lacked true chi, it looked no different from military boxing. Forceful yet somewhat comical. Enough! End this farm play. Get lost, Mrs. Fu said disdainfully. Hearing this, Zhao Yin and others couldn't help but show a relieved smile. As expected, you don't decide your success, only those above do. With such a bad attitude, offending Mrs. Fu and still thinking you could pass? Thinking you're some kind of genius. Actually, Murong's performance was indeed quite impressive, at least among this group of test persons he was outstanding, but just as Zhao Yin thought. Mrs. Fu was petty. If she thought you were insufficient, then you were. Seeing that he, a peerless genius, was really about to be kicked out, his perfect plan of passing his skills might come to an abrupt end, Murong struggled quickly, saying, I still have more. Yet Zhao Yin and others didn't want to give him a chance, as they were about to enforce his removal. Suddenly, a spring-like tiger roar sounded, startling everyone. At this moment, Morong quickly displayed the intent of the white tiger. Since it didn't utilize true chi, this tiger intent was a bit lacking, but had a stronger sense of calling for a mate. However, this roar still truly awed everyone. It could be considered a startling roar indeed. Morong said, "What I've grasped isn't just the hand technique, but the overlapping text on the steel. I always feel there's a white tiger hidden within." White tiger! This time, it was Mrs. Fu's turn to be surprised. She said, "Tell me, what exactly is this white tiger?" Morong said, "A very beautiful white tiger, clearly a tiger. Yet it has the feel of a beautiful girl. I always feel like I'm about to transform into that." Afraid that things might change, Zhaoyin couldn't help but wanted to go forward and continue driving Morong out. But Mrs. Fu's scolding voice had already risen. "Back off! My goodness! Could this blind daredevil have accidentally discovered something? If before what Morong displayed was three-legged cat kung fu, then that strange, spring-like tiger roar just now was definitely not that simple." For a moment, Mrs. Fu really thought it was possible. "Wait, tell me in detail later," Mrs. Fu told Morong. Her eyes also filled with a ravenous emotion, as if wanting to squeeze Morong dry. Zhaoyin, being scolded to back off, stood there blankly. She was clearly very bright and the Mrs. Fu's favorite, but now it seemed that her position was about to be taken by this woman. Mrs. Fu, elated by Morong's performance, still didn't forget her true profession of insulting and eliminating people. After all, it was the day of the last three positions. It must be said, the nicknames given to the test persons of Mingyu Palace were each uglier than the last. Like sows and bitches, truly women were the best at making things difficult for other women. Duan Yun stepped out. Even before Mrs. Fu began to scold, he preemptively said, "I and Duanmu Rong comprehended together. What she understands, I do too. But what I saw wasn't a white tiger, it was a white crane." Chapter 416. As the words were spoken, Mrs. Fu, initially intent on insulting, was choked up. It felt, somehow, like being aroused by an aphrodisiac, only to be suddenly restrained. It was truly uncomfortable. This made her somewhat irritable. She couldn't help but look towards the Morong brothers, who promptly said, "Yes, Mrs. Fu. She and I are from the same village. We discussed everything and came here together." The two's fake identities were indeed that of coming from the same village. White tiger, white crane. Mrs. Fu fell into deep thought, eventually saying, "You too flirtatious. You truly have gained some insight. Mingyu Palace won't treat you unfairly. I said those things to you before for your own good. If I hadn't pushed you like that, you wouldn't have been able to gain insight. We'll talk in detail later." By this time, Mrs. Fu's tone had become much more polite and friendly. Such a change in demeanor was truly laughable. Afterwards, 3 test persons were eliminated, dragged out as if they were pigs about to be slaughtered. In the eyes of Duan Yun and the Morong brothers, this might actually be a blessing in disguise for them. Mingyu Palace was a place that could turn people into ghosts. Even these 1-in-a-million cultivation geniuses would be affected in spirit, not to mention these ordinary people. The waters of the martial world are deep, and those of Mingyu Palace even more so. Not just anyone can wade through them. Duan Yun and the Morong brothers were left behind and asked for details. Naturally, the two recounted the story as they had previously agreed upon, glossing over the process and only revealing the result, as if the shadows emitted different auras, similar to a white tiger and a white crane. The Morong brothers even personally drew a white tiger girl painting. Seeing Mrs. Fu cherish the painting like a treasured possession, the Morong brothers couldn't help but say, "Then, could we have the chance to present our insights personally to the elder?" Mrs. Fu looked at him, initially wanting to scold, but her expression softened as she said, "You'll have the chance. Continue your contemplation. Mingyu Palace, and I won't let you down. Go rest." Upon returning amongst the test persons, the attitudes of everyone towards the Morong brothers and Duan Yun had completely changed. From disdain and dislike to respect. Some couldn't hold back, ignoring the feelings of Zhao Yin and others, and started getting close to them, even asking them for advice. Duan Yun and the Morong brothers had relatively rich experience in transferring cultivation knowledge. After all, the Murong brothers had experience teaching an entire village, and he was intent on promoting the White Tiger path, so he was ready to share all he knew. People suddenly thought he was a good person and started asking him for advice. The Murong brothers liked the feeling of being surrounded by women and continued to impart their teachings. For a moment, the Murong brothers, who seemed about to be eliminated, became the big sister there, making Zhao Yin and others very uncomfortable. The next day, when Mrs. Fu saw the White Tiger girl painting being circulated within the mountain villa, her face turned green. She had initially wanted to enjoy this knowledge alone for a while, and then hand it over only to let the elder know. She hadn't anticipated that this seemingly sensible person would be a blabbermouth, spreading it everywhere, completely disrupting her plans. By evening that day, Mrs. Fu realized the matter could not be delayed. Clearly, there were insiders in the villa, people from other elders had come to inquire, and the elder Yang Li had even sent someone to ask about the news. Mrs. Fu hurried to report the situation, feeling the elder's displeasure and becoming somewhat fearful. After returning to the villa, the entire place had entered a feverish state. If before, these test persons were diligently cultivating, willing to be humiliated and pricked by needles, all for the chance to rise above others and become disciples of Mingyu Palace. Now, they were truly immersed in cultivation techniques. It wasn't clear whether it was the Murong brothers' simple and clear explanations or the vivid White Tiger girl painting that had an effect, but the group seemed to truly grasp something, cultivating in an impressive manner. Not just in this villa, but even disciples of other factions within Mingyu Palace had gotten the news and began to secretly cultivate. 2 days later, the steel that had originally been in the villa was moved away. It was said that Elder Yang Li wanted to comprehend it personally. A group of disciples grieved for a while, but soon lifted their spirits and continued to cultivate. Day and night they looked at that steel, having engraved its contents into their sea of consciousness. Even without the steel, they could still cultivate. Elder Yang Li and Third Elder Yin Jing looked at the steel, their expressions excited. Originally, it was Yin Jing who had informed her about the steel, and they had excavated it together. Now the two had received news, and quickly realized that this time was different from before. Both elders of Mingyu Palace were indeed masters. Even though the Murong brothers and Duan Yun had omitted the process, they instantly speculated that it had to do with the meaning. Holding the White Tiger girl painting, Yang Li said, "These two new test persons don't understand, not sticking to the techniques, instead accidentally attaining the meaning within the techniques by chance. Fortuitously, they combined the meaning in one step, becoming what they described as the White Tiger and White Crane." Yang Li couldn't help but exclaim in excitement. This insight from the test is something they don't understand its value. "Sister, this is truly a godsend opportunity," followed Yin Jing excitedly. The two no longer hesitated and immersed themselves in deep contemplation. Just like the Murong brothers thought, both elders believed the White Tiger to be far more domineering than any crane, not to mention the Murong brothers had provided many insights. Therefore, Yang Li and Yin Jing both contemplated the essence of the White Tiger. The two usually had their subordinates work hard for them, cultivating fiercely, and even harshly farming sweet potatoes, while they themselves enjoyed much more leisure. Chapter 417. But no one could resist the temptation of divine skill. The two were so engrossed in their understanding that they ate roasted sweet potatoes when hungry and drank fine grape wine when thirsty. Murong brothers and Duan Yun were also summoned by the palace master to Lingyu Palace, ready to be called upon at any moment. Lingyu Palace is the residence of the palace master, Yang Li. They had finally moved their plan forward a step. The Murong brothers were excited. They could sense that the atmosphere of Mingyu Palace had changed as they imparted their martial techniques. At least, the majority of the people they came in contact with were immersed in grasping the essence of the White Tiger. How should it be said? The allure of divine skill is stronger than a plague to the people of the martial world. It had quickly infected many disciples of Mingyu Palace. Because everyone knew the cultivation technique tested by the palace master was extraordinary, no one wanted to fall behind. In Mingyu Palace, not just the lower ranks were feverish, the higher-ups were as well. The palace was divided into 3 factions, one led by the palace master and third elder, another by the second elder and elder Zhijian, who did not get along with the first, and the rest looked up to the two palace masters who unfortunately had long stopped caring about such matters, hence they seemed relatively neutral. But everyone knew that, with the palace masters being indifferent to worldly affairs, it was the elders who were revered. With the elders competing fiercely, naturally no one wanted to lag behind. And so, a cultivation frenzy swiftly took over Mingyu Palace. In theory, this understanding should have been the sole advantage of the palace masters faction. But with the Murong brothers being loose-lipped about everything, and with internal supporters from other factions in the manor, the secrets were soon out. Palace Master Yang Li was at one point quite annoyed, feeling that Duan Murong was more talkative than the divine doctor of the Jiangzhong sect, Shui. If not for considering her usefulness, she might have already severely humiliated and killed her. Nevertheless, in order to stay ahead, she didn't have the time to bother with these issues and continued delving into the steel. After all, she was still at an advantage, exclusively benefiting from the steel and having more detailed insights. When Murong brothers and Duan Yun were summoned to Lingyu Palace, they went from initial excitement to gradually sensing that something was off. The palace was built lavishly, befitting a holy land of martial arts, but surrounded by sweet potato fields. It had a somewhat peculiar air. Still, it showed a significant heritage. What felt strange was that after they were summoned here, they were left unattended. Lingyu Palace was eerily quiet, dead silent. Occasionally, they heard movement, but every door and window was firmly shut. Only after they sneaked a peek did they realize that these people were all practicing their cultivation techniques. Practicing the White Tiger technique imparted by the Murong brothers. The copies of the White Tiger girl painting had spread far and wide by now. They had come across 3 copies, and none looked quite the same. In one, the Murong brothers could hardly recognize it anymore. You call this a White Tiger girl which only retains female legs for protection? Even though the painting was distorted, it still couldn't prevent the disciples of Mingyu Palace from fervently trying to comprehend it. Afterward, a bizarre scene unfolded. Murong brothers and Duan Yun personally witnessed 2 disciples of Mingyu Palace with a new king character on their foreheads. This character did not appear to be fake, but rather like a natural birthmark. They knew these 2 people from before, and they did not have this mark then. Soon after, they saw another disciple of Mingyu Palace grow long whiskers, which spread out to both sides of the face, paired with small eyes, very much resembling those of a tiger. For a moment, Duan Yun thought he had encountered the Tiger Whisker Lady. It has to be said that Palace Master Yang Li was indeed deserving of her title. She was the fastest among the group in grasping the essence. Third Elder Yin Jing had been practicing with her when suddenly startled awake by a tiger's roar at noon. "I've made it! I really made it!" Just as Yang Li waved her hand, it was like a fierce tiger swiping its claws, forming a concept of white tiger in the air, carrying a terrifying aura of death. However, Yin Jing was taken aback, realizing that her sister, Yang Li's, hair on top of her head had fallen out. No, even her eyebrows were gone, leaving only a ring of black hair around the outer side of her head, looking very sinister. You have to understand, the inner circle of Mingyu Palace always paid attention to appearance. They were supposed to be cold fairies outside. Although Yang Li was on the plump side, she had always kept herself well-maintained and dressed in Mingyu Palace's silk garments, plus her cold demeanor and the aura of her powerful cultivation technique. She fit the image of a Mingyu Palace elder and fairy. But now, how did she resemble someone who practiced an evil skill and turned into a pervert? Had the white tiger essence practiced by the peerless martial artist gone wrong? Yin Jing hadn't noticed that a ring of hair on top of her own head had also fallen off, and her eyebrows had grown sparser. As for places where the changes should have been more visible, they were even harder to detect. That's because she herself was a white tiger. Chapter 418. Catch them off guard. Immortal Crane Divine Needle. Fire. Duan Yun and the Murong brothers waited. They had been eating sweet potatoes at Lingyu Palace for 2 days, but still hadn't been summoned by the elder. They wanted to take action deliberately but had to be cautious. They had been to dangerous places before, such as the Ghost Manor in the martial world, where they had ventured deep and fought fiercely, leading to the storyteller slandering them, saying they were the most terrifying existence, a lingering nightmare for the surviving assassins of the manor. If the Netherworld Manor's buildings were tall, like a giant's dwelling, oppressive and solemn, then Mingyu Palace seemed much more approachable. Not cornfields, but sweet potato fields. If not for the grandeur of Lingyu Palace, one might mistake it for a large farmstead. However, this ordinariness was just its facade. The seemingly peaceful sweet potato fields occasionally revealed Mingyu Palace disciples working, just like ordinary farmers. This too was a famous sight of the Mingyu Palace. A group of women, looking icy and ethereal, digging sweet potatoes in the fields. It was a scene as paradoxical as even beautiful girls fart. If you were misled by its superficial calmness, thinking its defenses were lax, you would be wrong. Whether inside the Lingyu Palace or in the tranquil sweet potato fields, numerous hidden mechanisms were concealed. As for what would happen if the mechanisms were triggered, Morong brothers could predict just one or two. One such mechanism they nearly set off seemed interconnected. If your Qinggong skills were inadequate, you would likely become a pincushion of arrows, or if you were lucky and proficient in Qinggong, soaring into the sky, your fate would be to get entangled in a net and then turned into a pincushion, perhaps even braised pincushion. For experts like the Morong brothers and Duan Yun, these series of mechanisms were not life-threatening, but they couldn't reveal themselves yet. Up to now, they had not found any clues about Ning Qing and Ziyu, so they had to maintain the identity of two clever characters. The two felt that dragging on like this was unacceptable, so they had already made plans. Once summoned by the elder, they would look for an opportunity to inquire about the whereabouts of Ning Qing and Ziyu. If necessary, they could opt for an unethical stealth attack, capture the elder Yangli, and forcibly extract the information or demand the release of the captives. They had realized that in Mingyu Palace, the higher the rank, the more information one had, and the more capable they were at solving problems. Ordinary small fry were truly useless. At noon that day, the red-dressed woman who had chosen them previously in the tea garden arrived. Seeing the two of them, the formerly disdainful look on the red-dressed woman's face had vanished. Previously, she had disdained the worldly Morong brothers, but now her face was full of warmth. In the future, we are all disciples of the elder. Just call me Sister Qing. The red-dressed woman, Sister Qing, knew that the two had performed well in their test and had arrived at Lingyu Palace in a matter of half a month. If they could please the master a few more times, they might become key figures in the Lingyu Palace. At this time, it was necessary to foster good relationships. The martial world is full of deceit and killing, but it is also a place of social niceties. Sisters, the master summons you. After exchanging pleasantries, Sister Qing got to the point. Hearing this, Duan Yun and the Morong brothers suddenly weren't tired anymore. They didn't like social niceties. They preferred saving lives and slaying demons. Their plan had finally moved a step forward. Duan Yun and the Morong brothers followed behind Sister Qing. Sister Qing couldn't help but start introducing Lingyu Palace to them. Sisters, since you have just arrived, don't wander around. There are many hidden mechanisms here, and taking the wrong path could mean no return, warned Sister Qing. The Morong brothers quickly replied, "When we came in, Sister had already warned us, so we don't dare go to another toilet pit." Sister Qing laughed and said, "Sister Murong is really humorous." If this comment were made in the past, the Morong brothers would have been considered crude and frivolous, and even now Sister Qing thought so. But she wouldn't say it out loud. Because of the significance of White Tiger and Immortal Crane, unbeknownst to them, the Morong brothers and Duan Yun had become figures worth befriending within Mingyu Palace. Especially the Morong brothers, the significance of White Tiger had already spread in Mingyu Palace. At that moment, Sister Qing couldn't help but ask, "Sister Murong, is the White Tiger girl painting like this? Look, I got this one and it's all blurred." Saying this, she pulled out a painting of the White Tiger girl and asked Morong brothers for guidance. The Morong brothers looked at the somewhat abstract White Tiger girl painting and said, "Sister Qing, this painting is not particularly similar. After I meet the elder, I will personally paint one for you." "Thank you, sister," said Sister Qing. unable to resist linking arms with the Morong brothers, a gesture of unusual warmth. Thinking back to her previous summons and her mockery of the Morong brothers, it was truly a case of initial arrogance followed by subsequent courtesy, which was amusing. At that moment, the Morong brothers tried asking, "Sister, if someone here makes a mistake, would they be locked up somewhere?" Seeing the red-dressed woman looking at them, they quickly explained, "We are very honest and won't make mistakes. We just want to understand." Sister Qing smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mingyu Palace clearly distinguishes rewards and punishments. If someone makes a minor mistake, they will be locked up in the Jade Water Prison. More severe cases won't be so simple. You sisters won't encounter such matters. After staying here a while, you will understand." Chapter 419. Clearly, the punishment at Mingyu Palace was so cruel that Qing did not wish to elaborate on it. "We have arrived." After passing through at least 6 long corridors and taking several turns, the 3 stopped at a spacious courtyard. The courtyard was full of exotic flowers and rare stones, with a prostrate pine tree lying above a clear pond, creating a scene full of artistic conception. "The master is waiting for you inside," said Qing. Her words had barely faded when a woman's voice came from inside. "Let them in. Without my command, no one is allowed into this courtyard." "Yes." Qing respectfully took her leave. Morong and Duan Yun exchanged glances. "Without my command, no one is allowed into this courtyard." These words undoubtedly represented their opportunity. If they were to take down this insult as an art form elder later on, as long as the commotion wasn't too great, they might avoid alerting anyone else. After all, not just anyone could enter this courtyard. The thought of obtaining clues about Ning Qing and Ziyu, and possibly even meeting them, especially Ning Qing, made Morong restless. Ning Qing was his world. These days, though he seemed fine on the surface, he had felt as if the sky had fallen. Not many could understand his true love that defied even death. The wooden door in front of them was getting closer, and Morong could not help but feel nervous. They had come in as civilians and naturally could not carry weapons. Honestly, he felt somewhat uneasy and less confident without the green moon saber in hand. Duan Yun, the dual masters of sword and saber, was also empty-handed. Yet confidence shone in his eyes. Without the electromagnetic sword field, he could handle the palace master of Mingyu Palace. Without sword and saber, he could still take on Mingyu Palace's elder. Besides being the dual masters of sword and saber, his fist and finger techniques were also supreme, not to mention the breaking body sword energy that could replace weapons. Morong pushed open the door, and the two walked in. Duan Yun, following suit, closed the door and even stealthily bolted it. The room was not wide, but it was very deep, with walls painted in black, creating an illusion of being inside a coffin. "Come over." At the deep end of the room, 2 lampstands burned with 4 rows of lights. The lights shone upon a rather solid-looking figure. That must be the elder Yang Li. Although she was dressed in a light and elegant gown, Morong and Duan Yun could tell at a glance that she was solidly built and had a round face. Indeed, after seeing many women, one could make such guesses even from a silhouette. Now elder Yang Li turned around. Sure enough, as they had expected, she was not beautiful, one might even say ordinary. However, a nimble light flickered in her eyes, a trait not just of profound inner strength but also of confidence. A white kerchief was wrapped around her head, a fashion unknown to them. Here they could see a painting hanging on the wall to her right, a white tiger beauty painting. Morong recognized it at once. It was his work, the one he had given to Mrs. Fu. Yang Li looked at Morong and Duan Yun, asking, "Have you made any progress in your understanding these past few days?" Morong nodded, replying to the elder, "Yes." "Then show me without any reservation," said Yang Li. Morong's face tightened. He hesitated whether to strike now or not. If he were to suddenly unseal his dantian during the demonstration, he might catch this old woman off guard. Morong respectfully made a bow and began to demonstrate the concept of the white tiger. He did not use true qi, but kept expressing the concepts he had comprehended. The candlelight flickered, but not intensely. Yet the atmosphere in the room began to change. Concept is a mystical level in martial arts, wherein some strange people in the martial world would practice only one move from childhood to adulthood. This one move might not be anything special, but it would allow them to dominate the martial world, as these individuals, through years of practice, returned to simplicity and gradually reached the level of concept. 3 types of moves were successively used by Murong, each representing a concept that was gradually taking shape. Yang Li had asked for his full display without reservation, so he held nothing back. He knew that in front of a master like this, feigning incompetence would not work. And only by garnering this old dame's attention could they have a better chance to sneak attack. 3 types of concepts gradually merged into one, like the overlapping shadows of the characters on a steel. White tiger. Roar. A cat-like tiger's roar echoed, and Murong struck out with a palm. Dust particles drifted through the air, making the candlelight flicker a few times, though not violently. But Yang Li's eyes were already wide open. When that palm strike was launched, it was just normal strength, yet the intent behind it was very sufficient. Yang Li was clearly aware that this was due to Duan Murong's lack of true qi. If she were to perform this strike, its power would undoubtedly be extraordinary. Although it couldn't compare to her Mingyu palm that she had practiced for decades, it was sufficient to show great potential for the future. She knew all too well that her Mingyu palm couldn't break through any further, but this white tiger-style palm technique carried boundless potential. Is this what a cultivation technique of a top-tier martial artist looks like? At this moment, she suddenly asked, "Will there be any changes to your body if you practice like this?" Murong replied with an earnest face, "There haven't been any changes." In reality, he was lying. Even without using true qi, he had shed some hair just now. But the hair was inside his trousers, who would know? "How many times do you practice a day?" Yang Li asked. "Between 20 to 30 times," Murong replied. Under the candlelight, Yang Li's expression became uncertain. Murong couldn't help but feel tense all of a sudden. Was it because he practiced too little, annoying this demanding old lady? Or did she discover I was lying? At this moment, Yang Li suddenly tore off her headscarf, revealing the top of her head. At that instant, both Murong and Duan Yun squinted their eyes. The candlelight just so happened to shine on the head of Elder Yang Li, making it rather luminous. What the hell? This old lady is bald. The hair around the periphery was still there, but the top was bald. Under the reflection of the candlelight, it looked quite terrifying. This reminded Duan Yun of Qiu Qianqi, who climbed out from the bottom of a valley in a TV show from his previous life. Yang Li fixed her gaze on Murong and said, "Tell me in detail, how did you cultivate this intent?" Murong was startled. He truly hadn't expected this old lady's condition to be worse than his. Had it started on the bottom and now moved to the top? So Murong shared his cultivation process, this time spilling everything. Transmitting cultivation, Murong, am a professional. After listening to Murong's words, Elder Yang Li's face darkened even more. She was originally not good-looking, but with this hairstyle it was enough to be called scary. Coupled with her sour facial expression, in the eyes of Duan Yun and Murong, who both valued beauty, it was almost akin to seeing a ghost. For a moment, Murong, thinking of his own dashing appearance, couldn't help feeling more confident. Yang Li threw her headscarf to the ground and couldn't help but question, "Why?" "The same cultivation method. You don't lose hair, but I do." Murong revealed a puzzled expression. He really didn't understand. How would this white tiger cultivation technique evolve once spread? He truly had no clue. "Why? You two are so ugly and don't lose hair, yet I, being so good-looking, end up losing hair," Yang Li said earnestly. Upon hearing this, the hair on Duan Yun and Murong's backs all stood on end. How could this ordinary woman be so confident? We're called ugly and you're considered good-looking? Even blind people wouldn't agree. Suddenly, Yang Li turned to Murong, her expression crazy. "No? Did you lie?" I didn't," Murong said, slightly nervous. At this moment, Duan Yun and he were ready to strike. "Take off your pants," Yang Li said. "Ha! I told you to take off your pants, Yang Li ordered. Morong replied, Elder, I really didn't. But, if you don't believe me, the disciple will prove it to you. His expression seemed a bit embarrassed and hesitant, yet his pants came off incredibly swiftly, even somewhat abruptly. And so, his hair and bird suddenly burst into Yang Li's line of sight with a fierce visual impact, shocking her so much that her eyes widened in a daze. But while she was in a daze that moment, the sound of a crane's cry had already risen. Immortal Crane Divine Needle. Launched. This is the Young Hero's Cooperative Tooth. Chapter 420. The perverted old demon, truly more ruthless than King Yen. At the moment Yang Li was stunned by the sight of Morong's great bird, Duan Yun had already broken the seal on his dantian and launched the Immortal Crane Divine Needle. His body's hair flew out, taking the form of an immortal crane. With a whoosh, the immortal crane spread its wings, the divine needles piercing the air, striking Yang Li throughout her body. As the elder of Mingyu Palace, Yang Li was truly a grandmaster, but limited by her talent, she couldn't compare with the two palace masters. That is only when compared to the legends of the martial arts world. She had already integrated her cultivation technique into her body's instincts. Even as she was still stunned by the sight of the great bird, her body instinctively executed the Mingyu palm. With this push of her palm, the center of her palm flickered like ice crystals. The palm wind she emitted seemed tangible, refracting a jade-like luster. Shifting flower. The primary use of the first layer of the Mingyu palm is shifting flower, so most of the hair shot towards her was diverted by the palm wind. Unfortunately, she was still hit by the needles. The main reason was that Morong's bird was too sudden and unexpected, and Duan Yun's Immortal Crane Divine Needles were exceedingly swift and fast. Before the palm wind of the Mingyu palm could form, over a dozen hair needles had already penetrated her body. What followed was intense burning pain and itching. Yang Li gritted her teeth and struck out with a palm towards Duan Yun and Morong, trying to force out the hair needles. But neither Duan Yun nor Morong would give her such a chance. In an instant, Duan Yun's fingers flicked continuously, his flirtatious finger strength like a swift gust. Meanwhile, Morong rolled over, picking up a piece of the floorboard to use as a saber, executing a fourfold spring rain strike. The true chi flowing in Yang Li was disrupted. She could only try to evade to the side using her movement technique. At the same time, the intense pain and itching continued to assault her, causing her movement technique to falter, and she was hit by at least 3 flirtatious finger strength strikes. She was deeply cultivated and, even under the shock of the falling attack, she clenched her legs together and bore it. But this resistance slowed her down. Breaking body sword energy. With no sword in his hand, but a silk-like sword chi gathered into a pillar, like a real sword, broke through the air. In a hurry, Yang Li struck out with another palm. The strange palm wind of the Mingyu palm deflected much of the breaking body sword energy, but ultimately it was too rushed, and so her body was struck by the remaining sword chi, spurting blood from her abdomen as she was slammed against the wall with a loud bang. Actually, if it had been a fair fight, she was stronger than Morong and could at least exchange several dozens, or even hundreds of moves with Duan Yun, using the Mingyu skills Shifting Flower and Wood to hold her ground. But who could have anticipated that their opponents wouldn't stand on the martial world's honor, shocking her with the bird and launching a shameful sneak attack? You should know that Mingyu Palace never had males, so the impact of Morong's bird was naturally much greater than others. Especially at this time, while still flapping with his bird, this scoundrel launched sharp saber attacks, a dual assault on spirit and flesh indeed. Yes, from the beginning this was never a fair duel. For Duan Yun and Morong, 2 martial arts young heroes, when dealing with an evil demon, there was never a need to talk about martial world honor. After the successful sneak attack, they didn't give their opponent any chance to breathe, launching attacks simultaneously. It truly could be said when 2 heroes make their move together, one would know if there was any chance. Yang Li had not even managed to slide down the wall when Morong's floorboard sword chi spun towards her again. Using a floorboard as a saber naturally lacked the dexterity of the green moon saber, but it carried a heavy chopping sensation. Yang Li fiercely executed a heavy drop, accelerating her fall. With a swoosh, the spinning sword chi flew past her bare head, leaving a deep gash on the wall. This commotion was not small, but unfortunately, she had just told her subordinates not to come near, so there was no one to assist. After all, making noise during a test wasn't unreasonable. Yang Li felt bitter inside, but she knew she still had a chance. This was her practice room, and there was a mechanism nearby that could at least give her a certain opportunity. The moment Yang Li landed, she flipped her hands and the stone tiles on the ground instantly rolled up like sheets of paper, swept up by the force of the Mingyu skills towards Duan Yun and Murong. Her rushed action naturally couldn't stop Duan Yun and Murong's offensive, but it bought her a moment's time. The crashing stone tiles shattered in an instant, and Yang Li accelerated into a dive, almost turning herself into an arrow, and she rammed her head against a certain part of the right wall. With a bang, the mechanism activated, and the wall suddenly spat out a dozen holes, shooting out more than 10 fast and fierce crossbow arrows. Yes, these arrows were as black and thick as those shot by engines, second only to siege crossbows, and their momentum was staggering. Facing these incoming crossbow arrows, Murong, with his hair tinged green, billowed around him, and his eyes remained as pure as the spring rain. A saber light like a round moon suddenly rose, and the incoming crossbow arrows were cut in half and fell to the ground. But the wall's holes trembled again, suddenly spewing out fierce flames, blocking both Duan Yun and Murong. Now Yang Li only felt those hair-like needles twisting and sewing inside her, causing her so much pain that she wished to tear through her flesh. But she knew this was her one and only chance to escape, so she exerted all her strength to push out a Mingyu palm. With the recoil from this force, her body floated upwards. She wanted to break through the roof and escape. The palm wind of the Mingyu palm, carrying the luster of jade, swept toward Murong like a wave. Murong raised his saber and executed a triple slash. The collision of sword light and palm wind knocked him askew.